141. Sudden murderous intention. Avada kept his eyes fixed straight ahead and swept his magical senses around. There was no glass, no ghosts, no water surfaces, no mirrors, no smooth walls, or any reflective object that could let him meet the basilisk's gaze indirectly. The basilisk's eyes were fixed directly on him, waiting for him to glance back. The instant Avada realized the basilisk was targeting him, he changed course and headed for the castle gate. He had to get outside quickly and break its line of sight. If the basilisk lost its target, it would be less likely to harm anyone else. Had the fact that he'd made the warning devices been discovered? He hurried, thinking through possibilities. Baron, Fred, and George were dependable. They wouldn't blab. Summers and the others were even less likely to leak anything. They didn't have the diary, and they'd already left school. Killing him wouldn't stop the spread of the warning devices anyway. Dozens had already been distributed, and any professor could replicate them with a little effort. It made no sense for the diary to kill him to prevent more being made. Maybe the aim was to create chaos by killing someone, to mask the basilisk's presence. But why act on Christmas when the school was nearly empty? A student's death would inflame public opinion, draw massive pressure on the board, and enrage Dumbledore. The diary, or whoever controlled it, shouldn't want that. Avada examined the basilisk's eyes again. Aside from the lethal dark arts, there was another layer of magic on its eyes. When activated, it could form two transparent shields over them, and that magic had been switched off. This thing was here to kill. His chest tightened and his pace quickened. Only after he pushed open the castle doors, stepped out onto the snow-covered lawn, and felt the basilisk's gaze recede and the overwhelming life force withdraw, did he feel some relief. The cold wind, laced with snow, stung his face and filled his lungs. His heart that had been pounding began to slow. He looked back at the towering, magnificent, but murderously dangerous castle with a mix of fear and anger. The basilisk, being active over Christmas, meant the diary's host was still in the school. Yet he hadn't sensed any soul fragments or Horcrux magic inside. Could the diary control the basilisk remotely or give it long-term orders? Was it targeting him specifically, or just planning to kill someone at random? The thought that followed made his blood run cold. He fumbled in his pocket, put on a startled expression, and dashed back into the castle, as if he'd forgotten something. He had to get back into the basilisk's line of sight so it wouldn't pick someone else. Most students didn't have warning devices. Anyone caught by that gaze would be in deadly danger. Less than 10 seconds after he re-entered, the immense life force returned, and the basilisk's stare locked onto him again. No matter how he moved, the gaze followed. Good, only him. Oddly, he felt a flicker of relief at being the target. Why? He forced his mind to sort possibilities. He had been the first to identify the basilisk and had made the rooster crow badges, the warning devices. But that hardly threatened the diary. The diary's personality wouldn't kill lightly. In the original Chamber of Secrets, it petrified students and only sought to kill Harry and Ginny after regaining strength. Could it be because Avada had sealed its main body? If the diary possessed a student to enter the school, it would know its main body had been sealed and that 3 students were responsible. In the original story, the basilisk's master had opened the chamber's entrance in a way that exposed a major vulnerability. He did it because the status of his main body mattered. If the host knew the main body was sealed, it might decide to eliminate the sealers. If that were true, Baron and Harry could be in grave danger. He moved faster. He sprinted into the Hufflepuff common room, ducked into his dormitory, cast the Ji-Chi Tianya curse to step into the spatial interlayer, then flew on his broom at full speed to the library where he'd sensed Baron working. He tore off a corner of his robe, turned it into a quick memo, and wrote in a single line, "Go to Hagrid's hut as soon as possible. Close your eyes as much as you can." He sent the note through the interlayer into Baron's hand, then headed straight for Gryffindor Tower. Harry was playing chess with Ron in the common room. Avada handed him a note in person and then returned to his dormitory. Ron and Hermione were also part of the plan against Voldemort, so getting them together would be an extra layer of protection. A moment later, they were all at Hagrid's hut, breathless. Avada and Baron waited there, faces grave. It wasn't easy to get down from the tower quickly. What's wrong? Harry asked. I was being followed by the basilisk, Avada said seriously. No blindfold, no reflections. Its gaze never left me. Don't ask how I know. I have some special abilities. I suspect this is connected to sealing Lord Voldemort, he went on. Snape said the thing controlling the basilisk is likely a fragment of Voldemort's soul. It has motive to come here and try to kill us, to avenge its main body. Especially you two, Harry and Hermione. He turned toward them. Harry, you're famous for your first defeat of Voldemort. Hermione, you're Muggle-born. Both of you are obvious targets. I've made more basilisk warning devices, he added. Harry, Ron, Baron, take one each. He looked at Hermione. You already have one, right? Hermione pulled a device from her pocket. Colin's incident yesterday reminded me, she said. I've been carrying it. That was a relief. Avada distributed the remaining devices and felt some of the tension lift. They discussed the recent events in low voices, then dispersed to return to the castle with heavy hearts. Avada watched them go, exhaled a cloud of white in the cold, and muttered to himself, he doesn't even care about killing anymore. God knows what that madman will do next. 142. The law of victory has been decided. Time is of the essence, Avada muttered, drawing a long breath of the cold air. It cleared his head. His thoughts snapped into focus. Then he stepped off toward Hogwarts Castle. He stopped short, squinting at a blurry figure racing down from the castle and waving, Baron. What was he doing here? Avada quickened his pace until he was close enough to hear him clearly. Why are you back? Avada asked. To confirm something. Baron panted, brushing snow from his cloak. It's better not to involve Harry and the others. It's dangerous, and they're still busy with the polyjuice potion. I went back to the castle to say goodbye. Then I looked into something and found a problem. What problem? During our last talk, Hermione mentioned Colin's matter and reminded her to bring a potion. That made me curious. So when we went back, I asked about it and found out what happened. Oh, I heard about that. Harry told me this morning. Avada nodded, waiting. You heard? Baron raised an eyebrow. Colin Creevey was attacked yesterday, and you only started to be assassinated by the basilisk today. There was nothing strange yesterday, right? That's right. Harry was with Colin when it happened. They hid in a classroom for 10 minutes until it passed. Put that together with your theory, and you could assume the basilisk's target yesterday wasn't Colin Creevey, but Harry beside him. Avada's pupils tightened. That was my guess, but I didn't say it outright to Harry. I asked about his schedule today. He went to a lot of places, ate in the kitchens, checked the potion in the room of requirement, lingered in corridors chatting. Except for following Hermione to the room of requirement, there wasn't another Muggle-born with a potion near him. So the question is, if Harry was the basilisk's target, why didn't it strike when he was most relaxed? And if the basilisk isn't targeting Harry, is it trying to kill you to avenge Lord Voldemort? Avada thought for a moment. It's hard to say. Maybe the basilisk didn't want to kill Harry, but couldn't. Don't forget, Harry wears glasses, so it's nearly impossible for the basilisk to kill him directly with its gaze. He's also announced he can hear the basilisk. Theoretically, he's the hardest to target of the three of us. I considered that, Avada said. Baron nodded. But if someone was determined to kill Harry, there are ways to work around that. Silence the basilisk, petrify him first, then finish the job in the infirmary. The possibility that Harry wasn't the target still exists. So? Avada scratched his head, puzzled. It was hard to believe Baron had sprinted back across the grounds just to suggest a vague, unprovable possibility. You can tell who the basilisk is looking at, right? Baron asked, his expression growing serious. I want to go with you and find out what it really wants. The two of us can walk around the castle to lure it out. Then you can see who it's watching. If it's trying to avenge Voldemort, then both of us would be targets. If it's only watching you, you'll have to find out why on your own. That's too dangerous. I can magically seal my sight, and you can guide me through the mental link. That way, there'll be no outward traces, and I'll avoid accidentally meeting the basilisk's eyes. Baron hesitated, then agreed. Avada took the basilisk tracking potion from his robes and used his wand to deactivate the alarm enchantment on it. Baron did the same, then said, Let's go. They climbed the castle steps. Baron drew his wand, murmured a soft, blinding charm, and put it away, feeling for his pocket as if to confirm the spell. Avada reconnected their minds with the mental link, and they began moving together in silence. Turn a little left, a little more. Stop. Good. Walk forward, no obstacles. There's a corner coming up. Walk 3 steps, then turn left. We need to talk while we're linked, not only communicate with thoughts. It might look suspicious otherwise. About 5 minutes after they entered the castle, Avada felt the basilisk's presence appear around them, following like a shadow. Its lethal gaze was fixed on him. The basilisk is here. Be careful. Is your blinding charm holding? Baron sent. It's fine. Who is it looking at now? Avada asked mentally. It's looking at me for now. Let's watch. They kept up casual conversation and wandered the corridors for nearly 20 minutes. All the while, the basilisk's attention remained unresponsive to Baron and locked on Avada. Avada's voice over the link trembled. It's been watching me the whole time. My earlier guess was wrong. There's no point in testing more. Let's split up. I need to think. Okay, be careful. I'll look up more about the basilisk. After Baron lifted the blinding spell and left, Avada returned to the Hufflepuff common room in a daze, trying to work out why the Horcrux diary and the basilisk had latched onto him. The basilisk only wanted him. It ignored Harry and Baron. It didn't make sense as Voldemort's revenge. Under Lucius Malfoy's influence, the Horcrux diary should consider him a descendant of a great wizard and leave him alone, yet it wanted his life. There had to be another reason. A sudden idea struck Avada so sharply he stopped halfway to the dormitory, breathless. Then his breathing quickened. Could it be? No, calm down. Think it through. Then the pieces clicked into place. That's it. Of course. Everything fits. He swung open the dormitory door and laughed aloud, the sound bright and sharp in the cold air. That makes things simple. Tom, Basilisk, Lucius, are you ready? He called and drew his wand. He cast a Jichi Tianya curse and slipped into the spatial inner layer. He found Baron quickly and sent him a note. Call Harry, Ron, Hermione, Fred, and George. Meet in the room of requirement at 8 tonight. I found the answer. Just 3 days into the Christmas holidays, a shocking piece of news rippled through Hogwarts. Gilderoy Lockhart, the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor who had stayed at school for the break, had been petrified. He was the first professor to fall since the attacks began. Lockhart's reputation among many students had always been poor for his own reasons, and some even sighed with relief when they heard, but the fact that a professor could be struck by the chamber's will, or a basilisk, threw the castle into a new kind of unease. Even more baffling was that Lockhart was a half-blood. He should not have been within range of whatever force the chamber used. It only got worse. On the morning of the 4th day of the holiday, Gryffindor's Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, both half-bloods, were found petrified in a corridor, and alarms tripped for several Muggle-born students who had remained at Hogwarts. The idea that the attacks could hit half-bloods as well as Muggle-borns threw the students who stayed behind into unprecedented panic. Most students scarcely dared leave their common rooms. A few purebloods still swaggered about, and that arrogance was mercilessly cut down that afternoon when Baron Shafiq, a pureblood from the Shafiq family, was found petrified. Severus Snape, who had already left Hogwarts, rushed back that evening. He went from common room to common room, trying to calm the students, promising he would consult with the castle itself to find the source of the problem. His words helped a little, but on the 5th day the castle felt deserted. Students grabbed breakfast from the Great Hall and fled back to their rooms, unwilling to linger outside the safety of their common rooms. Then came the worst news. On the 5th day of the holiday, Harry Potter, the famous boy who had twice defeated Voldemort and whose life had once proved impervious even to Avada Kedavra, was found petrified at the entrance to the Gryffindor common room. If the chamber's will could touch someone like Harry, nothing seemed safe. Snape had no choice but to deliver meals personally to the common rooms. Nobody would risk leaving. This was not right. Listening to the pale-faced murmurs of his classmates, Tom Riddle's fragment in the diary grew anxious. This was not how it should be. He had commanded the basilisk to kill Ken, not to wreak this indiscriminate havoc. He should have removed whatever shield covered the basilisk's gaze. Why were the victims only petrified and not killed? Why had Harry Potter, the one who had driven his main body into retreat and who inexplicably spoke Parseltongue, been struck? And why had Ken not been attacked at all? At first, when the first 2 petrifications were reported, he'd been contemptuous. The basilisk was under his control. There should be no accidents. He had ordered it to kill Ken, and it would do that before anything else. Those early petrifications had to be imitators, fanatical purebloods trying to sow terror. He and many around him had assumed that. But when Pomfrey and Snape in the hospital wing pronounced the victim's condition identical to the basilisk's work, too precise for any imitator, Tom's confidence faltered. The possibility that something was wrong with the basilisk itself had to be considered. When he heard that even Harry had been hit, he could not sit idle. If that boy could make his main body retreat, perhaps he had some way to influence the basilisk too. If so, a flash of ruthlessness hardened in him. Then he would have to kill Harry himself. He moved the body of the boy who hosted him, wrapped himself in the expensive invisibility cloak, and slipped out of the common room without anyone noticing, clutching his own diary. He reached to sense the basilisk's location. The basilisk should have been near the Hufflepuff common room, but it was not. It was in the corridor outside an empty classroom. Ken wasn't cowering in a common room like everyone else. Had the basilisk disobeyed his orders completely? Careful, Tom guided the boy's steps toward the corridor. He stopped dozens of meters from the classroom, made the host unconscious and covered him with the cloak, then condensed his own illusory presence around the diary. After casting a disillusionment charm on himself, he crept forward. 30 meters. 20. 15. A strange, intoxicating thrill washed through him suddenly, almost overwhelming his tenuous hold on the world. It was like the first time he'd held a rosewood wand, like the first time he'd seen Morphin Gaunt or the elder Tom Riddle, an inexplicable sense of kinship, as if there were blood ties. Absurd. He had no body now, no blood, but the feeling pulsed nonetheless. What had happened to the basilisk? What was in that empty classroom? He hesitated, torn between retreat and the need to know, when a faint voice broke the silence. Though muffled by the door and walls, the sound carried clearly down the corridor. Tom's bloodless heart tightened. He recognized the voice and the language all at once. It was Parseltongue. His target, Ken, was inside, speaking to the basilisk. "You say, when will he come to see me?" the voice asked. The voice continued, unexpectedly familiar and cold. "He's ordered you to cause such a mess, and he still doesn't come? He even sealed your mouth so you can't speak to me. What a heartless fragment. Who could be so patient? The ring, the diadem, or the diary? Impossible." Tom Riddle's form wavered, suddenly thin and insubstantial, as if the shock itself threatened to dissolve him. He had braced for the possibility that Ken knew about the diary, but when Ken used the word fragment, something deeper, more violating, tore through him. Although he no longer needed to breathe, his chest heaved violently. Who is he? What is he? For a moment, all his neat assumptions unraveled. Had his earlier guess been wrong? Had the attacks of the last few days been manipulated? A cold, unbidden fear flashed across his translucent eyes. The basilisk, controlled from the chamber, had answered to that other voice. The assaults that had driven him here might all have been set to lure him into a trap. He felt for the first time an urge to flee that overrode even his old obsessions with purity and Potter. As long as he could put as much distance as possible between himself and that uncanny Ken. But Ken had said more than just that the diary existed. He had mentioned a ring and a diadem. Tom tried to stitch the fragments together. Had the main body created other Horcruxes? But wasn't one Horcrux enough for immortality? Why would the main body split himself further? Then Ken's voice, honeyed and merciless, slipped into the classroom again, as if reading his confusion aloud. "It's most likely the diadem. He's been hiding at the school for a long while, and as Ravenclaw's diadem, an artifact tied to wisdom, it's not surprising it could hatch such schemes. But the diary isn't impossible either. After all, that piece was given the task of purging mudbloods. No, it's probably the diary. Born only a little earlier than I, the diadem would certainly know what the main body has become and might not obstruct my plans." The sheer load of information in those words made Tom's mind freeze. When the implications landed, absurdity and a dawning horror gripped him. The main body had not made just one Horcrux. He had sliced himself into many, and this Ken, this mocking seated figure, was one of them. Tom blinked. He wanted to refuse the idea outright, to deny it on principle, but the facts slid too smoothly into place. No wonder he had felt that bond, that shared Parseltongue touch. No wonder the basilisk had obeyed. No wonder this Ken had known about the chamber from the start. And the strangest, most infuriating part, a Horcrux, one of the main body's own fragments, had turned against the whole. As a part of the main body, Tom had been born with a loyalty that gleamed purer than steel. Separated for decades, he had never forgotten his mission. To hear that a fellow fragment had schemed against their creator and set the main body to be sealed by Dumbledore, had even killed the basilisk, made his indignation flare beyond what he had felt at hearing of the main body's defeat. Ken spoke on, languid, as if allowing Tom to stew. The basilisk lay coiled in the pipe and listened without fuss, a cold audience to Ken's soliloquy. "Those earlier Horcruxes will think I betrayed the main body," Ken said. "The diadem and the others probably understand me. After all, they know what the main body's become." He planned to split his soul into 7 pieces. 7 pieces. Tom's whisper was almost a physical thing. One was enough. Why split into 7? Ken's voice softened with a weary resignation. After the diary was made, something changed. The main body's mind began to narrow, to fixate. He believed 7 to be a powerful number and set about making it so, planning 6 additional Horcruxes. He began collecting precious relics to split his soul into: Ravenclaw's diadem, Slytherin's locket, the Gaunt family ring. He paused and then, with a small rueful flourish, produced an exquisite golden cup from where he'd been holding it and lifted it as if to salute the doorway. And finally me, Hufflepuff's cup. Tom felt a prickling discomfort under his pride, a small dissonance he could not immediately name. More Horcruxes should have meant greater safety. If 1 or 2 were undone, the rest could keep the main body's life anchored. But, Ken went on, fortune had not favored that plan. As the number of soul splits grew, the main body's cunning dwindled, Ken said, his tone sharpening. He grew impatient. He stopped winning people over. He became a brute who preferred force to finesse. Worse, he didn't recognize his own decay. It was only after I was severed and had time to see my own life from outside that I understood what had happened. Tom felt the explanation settle against his old, proud disbelief. The idea that something as cunning as the main body, a being who had orchestrated so much, could be undone by simple error had always been intolerable. If decay of mind left him ripe for a trap, it made a kind of grim sense. But it still did not explain betrayal. Ken continued without pause. Before the 6th Horcrux came to be, the main body was caught. He lost his body. Do you really think a newborn child bested him? No. The infant was a distraction. Something old and powerful did the true damage. So that was it, Tom thought numbly. The version of events he had clung to, of raw supremacy undone by a lucky strike, crumbled. A slow, cold anger replaced it. Even so, if the main body's body had been lost, the 5 of them kept his life from vanishing altogether. Ken spoke of the years after, vaguely at first, then with a bitterness that made his words taste like iron. What he did in the next 10 years I can only guess, but a main body that has lost sanity is dangerous yet limited. Ken's voice tightened. And last year, at his weakest, he risked everything to get into Hogwarts. Guess why? There was sarcasm pressed so thin it was almost a hiss. Dumbledore made it obvious. He put the Philosopher's Stone in the school, left it there for anyone to find, rather than keeping it on his person. The main body stumbled in, and with that, he left himself no escape. Tom imagined the scene and felt a familiar, fresh pang of outrage at the notion of such sloppiness. Ken, however, seemed to be using the obviousness of the trap as proof of a greater point. Now you understand, Ken said quietly. As Horcruxes, our duty cannot be limited to holding the main body's life. We should help him, compensate for his failings, and the best way to restore his mind and sanity is to reunite his soul. The sentence hung there like a promise or a threat. The moment I heard the main body had failed, I immediately began to devise this plan, to reunite us, to restore the soul to its entirety, and to resurrect the true, great Lord Voldemort. Ken sighed. I was entrusted by the main body to the Lestrange family, and as fate would have it, after the main body's failure, all the Lestranges were sent to Azkaban. I then bewitched their house elf and used his body so that I could act. For 10 years, I sat alone in the old Lestrange manor, poring over their records, experimenting with spells, and searching for a way to rejoin the soul. After some time, I stumbled on an unlikely lead, what I call the confession effect. Through extensive experiments and by studying the family's secret papers, I discovered an absurd phenomenon. If the creator of a Horcrux truly repents the murders that made it, his soul will reunite. I would never use such a thing. Why repent? Why give up immortality? But its existence proves a point. Souls can be made whole again, and there must be some underlying truth to that. Fortunately, as the last remaining Horcrux, I inherited almost all of the main body's research on souls. Combined with the Lestrange documents and the help of that house elf, I finally found the correct method of fusion. Ken paused, then poured out an overwhelming cascade of theories, formulas, and data. His vocabulary and technical detail even exceeded Parseltongue. More than once, he resorted to English to express himself fully. Tom stood just outside the circle of words, analyzing everything Ken said. His knowledge exceeded mine in places, Tom thought. There were parts I hadn't mastered, but my foundation was solid. After all, I remembered researching souls and making Horcruxes. He worked through Ken's ideas and figures, and as the explanation continued, his eyes brightened, completely logical. Everything I know about souls is right, and Ken goes deeper. His proposal seems genuinely feasible. The more Tom considered it, the more amazed he became at the Golden Cup who had conceived such a plan. How had he devised something so devious and clever? He was a genius. No, the main body was the genius. If the main body had been allowed to continue, he would have reached this level too. That the cup could produce the idea proved the main body's capability. If the main body could be cured, he would surely have such brilliance once more. But why would Ken send the main body to Dumbledore? Could he be trying to replace him? No, he wouldn't have killed the basilisk if he'd wanted to betray the main body. Tom found himself tempted. Should he appear and ask? A dangerous urge surfaced and was immediately suppressed. No, revealing the location of his vessel would be catastrophic. Not even Lucius knew he had been constrained by that damned thing. But perhaps he could approach it as a spirit. He could cloak the diary and speak in his spirit form only. Once the thought took hold, it would not be denied. Tom forced the student he had knocked out to his feet, tucked the diary into his robes, wrapped the invisibility cloak tight, and retreated to a corner. He drew himself into a narrower, more fragile form, and, after long seconds of silence, hardened his resolve. His shape wavered between solid and ethereal, slipped through the classroom door, and stood before Ken, who cradled the golden cup. "Oh," Ken started, then smiled faintly. He raised the cup in a small salute. "You've come. You must have heard what I was saying earlier. Judging by your age, you're the diary. I'm the golden cup." The link of blood felt even stronger now, cementing Tom's certainty. This was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. "I have questions," he said. "Oh," Ken gestured for him to sit across from him. "You want to ask why I sealed the main body, don't you? And why I killed your basilisk?" Tom's voice dropped. His gaze was a snake's, cold and probing. If he sensed deception, he would dissolve his form and take back control of his body at once, racing to the common room. Why seal the main body? That was part of the plan. Ken spoke with casual detachment, as if Tom's stare meant nothing. The main body was consumed by his grand scheme of splitting his soul into 7 pieces. He was blind to his own brokenness. Given that, do you think he would ever willingly abandon 5 completed Horcruxes and allow his soul to mend? Ken asked. No, Tom admitted after a moment, reluctant. Exactly, so I used Dumbledore. Ken's smile was half triumphant. The body I control now is only a 3rd-year student. Last year he was a 2nd year. However weak that vessel, the main body is still the powerful Lord Voldemort. You cannot enact a long game against absolute power without artifice. I had to use Dumbledore to ensure the main body would be sealed. Tom said nothing. I even hinted to Dumbledore about Horcruxes. With his intellect, he would pursue the idea. As long as Dumbledore believed he'd destroyed all Horcruxes, the main body would be safe from immediate threats. Meanwhile, I have earned Dumbledore's trust. Is it so hard to imagine borrowing the main body temporarily under the guise of research? Tom remained silent. he could see the logic and the danger. Killing the basilisk was to prepare another avenue to longevity, Ken continued. Reuniting the soul strips away the protection Horcruxes provide and raises the risk of death enormously. There is a technique the Lestranges used. If you incorporate basilisk flesh and blood while reconstituting the body, you can inherit its longevity and vital resilience. The ritual also needs the father's bones and an enemy's blood, which are not hard to procure. I couldn't have killed the basilisk with my current power, Ken admitted. So I informed Dumbledore of its weakness to rooster crows, hoping it would die in the Chamber of Secrets. Then, when the time came, I would enter the chamber and recover its body for later use. But the chamber's password was changed. You changed it, didn't you? Tom's silence answered him. I'm not going to ask why you did that, Ken said mildly. But you must see, I have exposed my main body to you, while I do not know where your vessel hides. At the very least, you should trust me somewhat. Ken lifted the cup toward him again and then lowered his voice. I need your help. With 146, Jinbei's sincerity. Help? Tom Riddle raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Since you listened to my plan all the way through and didn't object outright, I'll take that as tacit approval. And from what I remember of myself, you should be the Horcrux most eager for the main body to regain full strength, yes? Ken's face grew serious. I need your cooperation to collect the remaining Horcruxes and eliminate Dumbledore, who's driven the main body into hiding. Eliminate Dumbledore? Before the main body returns? Tom frowned. You know Dumbledore's power better than anyone. We aren't strong enough to face him openly yet. And what do you mean by collect the other Horcruxes? As one of the final Horcruxes created, don't you remember where the others are hidden? The main body left a method to kill Dumbledore. Ken smiled enigmatically, took a plain ring from his pocket, and pushed it toward Tom. Set into it was a dull gray stone carved with a triangle containing a circle bisected by a line. Tom felt a cold dread and recoiled. He knew that emblem. It was the Gaunt family mark. The ring gave off the same sense of blood connection he'd felt from the golden cup. You have another Horcrux? Not only that, Ken's smile widened. This ring was left by the main body specifically to kill Dumbledore. It can't act on its own. Instead, it's bound with a lethal curse that kills anyone who touches it. Obviously, it won't affect us. Tom drew that damned student's wand from his pocket and gestured toward the ring, unease clear on his face. A very powerful curse. You still don't fully grasp the main body's resources. Ken's tone sharpened with pride. So long as I can get this Horcrux, which I collected with great difficulty, into Dumbledore's hands after we retrieve the main body from him, Dumbledore will die. But for that, I need your help. You want me to bring Dumbledore back to Hogwarts? Tom asked. To get him to carry the main body again, openly or secretly, so you can hand him the ring? Yes. Ken nodded. Dumbledore will never leave the main body alone once he knows the danger. I can't contact him directly, so I must rely on your influence over your pure-blood followers to create an opportunity to move Dumbledore into position. If that's your plan, why didn't you kill Dumbledore at the start of the school year? Tom's voice had a suspicious edge. You could have done it then. Ken's jaw snapped shut. You have the nerve to ask me that. He ground his teeth. My plan was to kill Dumbledore only after we'd gathered all the Horcruxes to minimize the risk during the main body's restoration. Who could have foreseen you pulling such a stunt? Dumbledore already suspects there's a Horcrux mastermind. How much effort will he pour into finding and destroying Horcruxes once he realizes their threat? How endangered do you think the other Horcruxes will be? If he destroys even one Horcrux, the main body's soul can never be whole again, Tom snapped. I bear some responsibility, too. Ken's expression changed. He took a breath and forced calm. I suggested to Dumbledore at the start of the year that a rooster's crow would kill the basilisk. That action alerted you, didn't it? We both acted from what seemed right at the time. A lack of communication caused this mess. And there's one more thing I need your help with. Ken folded his hands. What now? Ravenclaw's diadem is missing. Ken rubbed his temples. Among the main body's 5 Horcruxes, 3 are accounted for, including yours. I know where Slytherin's locket lies, though it's not easy to get, but the real problem is the Ravenclaw diadem. The main body hid it in a secret room at Hogwarts. After I got inside the school, the first thing I hoped to do was find it and use it, but when I reached the hiding place, it was gone. Do you think it can act on its own? Tom's face hardened at the implication. Independent action? If only it were that simple. Ken let out a bitter laugh. The diadem grants extraordinary intelligence to whoever wears it, coupled with a Horcrux as its vessel and the main body's cunning. Do I need to say how dangerous that would be? The fact that it escaped its original hiding place shows it has at least some autonomy. If we're unlucky, it could frustrate my plan. At best, it'll cause problems like the one we just had. At worst, his Adam's apple bobbed and his voice turned cold. At worst, it could abandon the main body altogether, become self-directed, and form another entity as dangerous as the main body. If that happens, what becomes of the main body and of us Horcruxes? Tom fell silent for a long moment, then nodded heavily. I'll order discreet searches for the diadem. I'll also remain alert in the school, see if it's lurking near us. Please. Ken exhaled, relief visible, and lifted the golden cup toward Tom. Oh, what about the basilisk? Tom remembered. Leave it for now. You might still need it to draw Dumbledore out. It can be dealt with later. Ken considered that, then agreed. As for the rest of your plan, that's your decision. I only ask that you bring Dumbledore back to Hogwarts. I understand. Tom inclined his head. Then Ken spoke again. Everything's too chaotic. Since we've agreed to cooperate for the time being, we can't afford more mistakes. We need a reliable way to contact each other. For now, regular face-to-face meetings, Tom suggested. He frowned. I don't have any suitable magical items at the moment, but I should be able to acquire a two-way mirror after the Christmas holidays. Then we'll meet here every 3 days during the Christmas break. Ken clapped once and decided. And hide your vessel and host as you did today. I don't mind so long as you carry out the plan. That's best. Tom's grip on his wand loosened a touch. I should return. My host has been out long enough. All right, see you in 3 days. Ken raised the golden cup somewhat casually. Tom nodded and melted through the wall like a shadow, slipping back into his host under the invisibility cloak. During their talk, he'd kept a sliver of attention on his host. If anyone had tried to approach, he would have erupted, subdued Ken, and then decided whether to kill him. 3 days, he thought. He leaned close to the basilisk coiled in the pipe, hissed a few words, then moved away. The great serpent stopped watching Ken, glided back, and disappeared into the darkness of the pipe. 147. The end. Double kill. On the 6th day of the Christmas break, the strange, sporadic petrifications that had put everyone on edge suddenly stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. That entire day, though a few students still moved through the corridors, no one was petrified. Word spread. Some students, bolder ones, or those who believed the culprit was the basilisk and carried warning devices, began to leave their common rooms and wander the castle. All through the 7th day of the holiday, nothing happened. Bit by bit, life returned to Hogwarts. The Great Hall at mealtimes once again had people sitting at the long tables. The library had visitors. The once empty corridors hummed with conversation and occasional laughter. Still, those who ventured out were a minority. Most students' fear hadn't lifted, so they kept to their common rooms, except to eat or to check the library for references to finish assignments. With only a few students remaining at school for the holidays, the castle as a whole remained quiet. On the 8th day, Diary Tom Riddle met Golden Cup Ken in an empty classroom, as arranged. Tom still used a phantasmal body condensed from his spirit and didn't reveal which student he was possessing. Nothing of consequence had happened in the 3 days since their last meeting. They simply compared notes on how to lure Dumbledore back, then went their separate ways. Before they parted, Ken warned Tom not to let the basilisk go completely quiet. If it became too inactive, someone might notice. He urged Tom to keep at least attempting attacks on Muggleborns, partly to further their grand plan to eliminate mudbloods, and partly to keep everyone convinced that the attacks were still happening. How should I lure Dumbledore back? Tom thought as he slipped through the corridor beneath his invisibility cloak, the basilisk trailing obediently in Parseltongue. Nowadays, almost every Muggleborn carried a warning device. Attacks were difficult. He was simply taking the basilisk for a walk, setting off a few warning devices to create panic and prove the attacks hadn't ended. Directly killing a student to force Dumbledore to return? Too risky. Dumbledore needed to return calmly and feeling secure so the Golden Cup could be taken from him. Exposing a weakness, temporarily losing power, and letting Dumbledore come back and resume the headmastership, that might work. But it would be a huge blow to Tom's reputation. The purebloods might resist him. He needed their support to find Ravenclaw's diadem. Golden Cup really threw me a tough problem, Tom thought, forcing a smile. But I'm not incompetent. At least my intelligence made him admire me. He must have been puzzled when I fainted the first time. He walked the corridor, eyeing likely targets, or anyone whose warning device he could trip to create a stir. He hadn't seen anyone for nearly 5 minutes. 5 minutes ago, the person he had passed had been a half-blood. Damn. Frustrated on both fronts, he was about to return to his common room. He'd try again at mealtime. It wouldn't be as deserted then. Petrificus totalis, expelliarmus, incarcerus, stupefy. Without warning, a string of spells exploded beside him. 4 jarring curses struck the student he occupied almost at once, freezing the body and sending Tom's spirit reeling. Someone had suddenly appeared, torn off his invisibility cloak, and in one deft movement flipped open the robe, located a black diary hidden in a secret seam, and shoved it into a pitch-black box. The lid snapped shut, and 5 thick loops of tape sealed it. In the few seconds before the box closed, Tom, still shaking off the daze, caught a glimpse of the attacker's face. "Ken!" he howled. Click, the cry cut off as the lid shut. "Finally, it's over," someone breathed. The student Tom had been inhabiting slumped to the ground. He stared in surprise at another student he had apparently knocked down, then glanced toward a corner of the corridor. "Professor, I've got him!" he called out. "Really? That's wonderful," another voice answered. A figure sprinted from the corner, all teeth and exuberance, Gilderoy Lockhart, grinning broadly. "Fortunately, you were here to back me up, Professor." The boy wiped sweat from his brow with a smile so sincere it was almost naive. "Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared to ambush him." "You did excellently." Lockhart helped him to his feet and patted his shoulder. "And with me here, of course I'd never let you face danger alone. Since you trusted me with your plan from the start, how could I betray you? You let a professor be attacked to draw the culprit out? That's so like you," the boy said with admiration. Lockhart's chest puffed. "I will write this into my next book. It will eclipse all my previous works." His face flushed and his breathing quickened. "All right, Ken, could you lift this student and send them to the hospital? She looks unconscious, an innocent caught up in this. She needs immediate care." "Of course, Professor." The boy nodded and, turning his back to Lockhart, used a levitation charm to raise the fallen student. "Obliviate." A white flash streaked like lightning. The boy heard the incantation behind him and tried to react, twisting enough to deflect most of the memory charm from his torso, but the spell struck his wand-holding right hand. It slammed into him with force, sending his wand spinning from his fingers. He shivered, clutched reflexively at the levitating student to steady her, and turned back in bewilderment to face Lockhart, whose expression had shifted into something cold and calculating. "Professor?" the boy stammered. "Why?" Lockhart asked with mock innocence. "Why what? Why would you?" the boy started, eyes bright with hurt. Lockhart chuckled triumphantly. "For my story, my dear Ken." "Story? What story?" the boy demanded. "This brilliant scheme you nearly pulled off. Think about it. Who would believe a second-year Muggle-born child solved the school's crisis and saved Hogwarts? Look at you, pale, disheveled, like a frightened little thing. Who would put your face on a book cover? No one would buy it." He laughed. "And I don't just take credit. I track these people down, interrogate them about what they did, and I obliviate them so they forget. If there's anything I'm proud of, it's my memory charm. You see, Ken, I work very hard for my fame." "You mean all your stories are stolen? All your great deeds are taken from others?" Ken demanded, incredulous and angry. No. Dedication, my boy. If people didn't think I did those things, my books wouldn't sell. Fame takes work." Lockhart's smile was oily and self-satisfied. "Now that I've humored your curiosity, it's time you repaid me by keeping my secret, isn't it?" "Oblivi. Expelliarmus. Petrificus totalis. Incarcerus." 3 spells erupted from thin air and struck Lockhart together, pinning him and removing his ability to resist. Someone threw off an invisibility cloak nearby, revealing a student carrying what looked like a recording device over his shoulder, a wand in one hand and a faint smile on his face as he watched Lockhart's confident expression fall into panic. "I recorded everything you just said, Professor," the student said softly, tilting his head to look past Lockhart. From the shadowed corner beside him, another person stepped forward from beneath an invisibility cloak. Another Avada Kedavra. 148. The Truth Comes Out, Part 1. How could? When Lockhart saw another Avada suddenly appear beside Baron, he shrank back in terror. He had just set down the unconscious student, picked up his fallen wand, and was still clutching the black box tightly. Half crouched beside the student, he waved his wand gently to rouse her. Then he turned and saw the other Avada standing beside Baron and called out in surprise. "The effect hasn't worn off yet?" "It should be soon, maybe a few more minutes." The other Avada scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. "That's good." He kept up the charm and watched nervously as the student's eyes fluttered open. "Are you all right? Can you hear me?" "Yes." The girl's voice was hoarse, as if she'd had no water for days. Then she managed to smile. "Finally, no more of those black pesky flies this time. I remember everything that happened these past few days. Thank you." "Welcome back to Hogwarts." Avada smiled at her. "Luna Lovegood, you were the biggest contributor to this plan." He patted her shoulder, then stood and looked down at the diary, sealed in the anti-curse box, and at Lockhart lying motionless on the floor. His grin widened until his voice trembled with excitement. "All right, everyone, it's over." "Baron, would you call Professor Snape and everyone from the Room of Requirement? It's time to tell the truth." "My pleasure." Baron was grinning too. He pulled a broom from his pocket and shot out the window. A moment later, footsteps sounded and a group spilled down the stairs. Snape, the Weasley twins, Hermione, Ron, Madame Pomfrey. "You caught him?" Snape demanded as he arrived. Avada raised the box. "I did not fail, Professor." He tapped the box with his wand, and the casing turned transparent, revealing the black diary inside. The book trembled, and within the glass, a furious face flickered. The boxes had a peering function, so the contents could be watched without risk of sudden teleportation. "You'll listen too, Tom." Avada smiled at the diary. "I'd be very disappointed if you, the one involved, didn't get to hear my whole plan." "You look like a villain when you smile like that." George muttered off to the side. Avada's expression straightened. He rubbed his face, retrieved a folded parchment from his pocket, and handed it to the twins. "This can be returned to you. Prank over." "Prank over," Fred said cheerfully as he tapped the paper with his wand. Avada looked around at the faces in the room, some astonished, some joyful, some furious, then lifted his chin and began to speak loudly. "So, everyone, I'll explain the whole story of what happened. If I get anything wrong, Tom, you must correct me." The diary raged silently behind the glass. Decades ago, when Lord Voldemort was still a student, he found Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, and as the heir, opened it. He released the basilisk intending to eliminate all Muggle-born students, and Myrtle died as a result. To stop things from escalating, he was forced to pause his plans and split his soul. He stored a fragment of it, along with a memory, in a diary, planning to reopen the chamber one day and finish what he started. "And this diary," Avada went on, raising the box so everyone could see, was later entrusted to one of his most trusted Death Eaters, Lucius Malfoy, for safekeeping. "It was him, after all," the other Avada sniffed angrily. "I knew Malfoy was up to something." "All right, Harry, calm down." Avada kept his smile and continued. "Last summer, when Lucius heard that Lord Voldemort had been defeated, he panicked. He was afraid someone would find he still possessed items belonging to Voldemort. So he began to sell off the dark artifacts in his home and tried to discard the diary. But the diary could think. It heard the Malfoys talking, and learning its master had been defeated, it revealed that it could think and questioned Lucius about what had happened. From Lucius's mouth, it learned the identities of the 3 students involved. One, an ordinary student who had supposedly defeated Voldemort as a baby but performed modestly at school, another a top pure-blood student, and he let the pause hang, smiling mysteriously, Gellert Grindelwald's descendant. "What?" Everyone stared at Avada in shock. "Fake." Avada rolled his eyes. I talked to Lucius during the summer of my first year, and we had a language mishap. He mistakenly thought I was Grindelwald's descendant. The truth is, I'm just an ordinary muggle-born. A few faces relaxed, though some still looked troubled. He went back to his explanation. The diary thought, how could my master be defeated by 3 students? Did Dumbledore intervene? No. If Dumbledore were involved, he would have no reason to hide the credit or to allow his students to become targets of Voldemort's remnants. No, this must have been their doing. But how did they do it? The diary realized its master, in his current state, couldn't be killed directly. Capturing or destroying him would require extensive knowledge of soul magic, complex and lengthy preparation, and absolute secrecy. That wasn't something achievable by raw power alone. It required knowledge, intelligence, temperament, and acting ability. Under those circumstances, the only explanation the diary could come up with for 3 students accomplishing such a task was this. The descendant of Grindelwald had inherited his talent, prophetic ability. Avada paused to savor the expression of shock on the diary's face behind the glass. Grindelwald was a renowned seer. It would not be surprising for his descendant to share that talent. A prophetic gift would explain where the knowledge and foresight came from. Realizing this, the diary became terrified. What if that student foresaw the Chamber of Secrets, the basilisk, or even the diary's own existence? That would threaten it utterly. So it resolved to find a way to kill that interfering prophet for good, to keep its secret safe forever. That's why the basilisk targeted me, and no one else. Avada's voice was steady. That's the conclusion I reached when I saw the basilisk trying only to kill me. Am I right, Tom? Avada looked back at the pale face in the diary. The transparent visage now showed a hint of fear. But, Avada said, turning his head to continue, killing a prophet is an extremely difficult task, because he might already have foreseen the Chamber of Secrets and the basilisk, and would guard against the basilisk's gaze, or even strike first to kill the basilisk. In that case, the diary would lose its greatest weapon. It's even possible the prophet foresaw the diary sneaking into Hogwarts, releasing the basilisk, and killing him, and so would find a way to solve the chamber problem at the start of term, and then expose the student carrying the diary. Even so, the diary still has a unique advantage. Used properly, all of the above poses no threat at all. Avada suddenly stopped, looking at everyone as if waiting for them to follow his train of thought. But everyone looked puzzled. Only Snape wore a thoughtful expression, and he was no showman. Avada continued, resigned to doing his own pacing. Dumbledore's speech at the end of last year offended all the stubborn pureblood families. They developed an unprecedented sense of crisis toward Dumbledore and wanted him gone. Coincidentally, the diary happened to have the most representative of those stubborn purebloods at its side. And Dumbledore happened to be the prophet's greatest reliance. This is how you counter the prophet. Just like that, the diary revealed his identity as Lord Voldemort to Lucius, earning Lucius's expectations. After all, in their eyes, Lord Voldemort was the only one who could stand against Dumbledore. By feeding on Lucius's mental power, the diary recovered much of its strength and regained the ability to condense a physical presence. Through Lucius, it contacted the stubborn pureblood faction and former Death Eaters that could be won over, secretly gathering a formidable force. This force was the key instigator of the later fainting incidents. I know, Hermione Granger reacted at last. They staged the fainting incidents, then sent out their own investigation team to present a truth that damaged Dumbledore's prestige and forced him out. No wonder Slytherin was attacked the most back then. They were in on it. Essentially correct. Avada nodded approvingly. But I think the fainting incidents themselves were still the diary's doing. The pureblood families only provided help, an invisibility cloak, and a dark arts device that could destroy mental power and cause people to faint. I think Lucius must have found a way to give the diary to a vulnerable student, probably a first year, otherwise it would have been easy to expose him. So the diary, newly empowered, could manipulate that student, enter Hogwarts through his body. Then Lucius supplied the cloak and the dark arts item, and the fainting incidents began. But before that, the diary did something urgent the very night of the opening ceremony. It erased Myrtle's memory and changed the Chamber of Secrets' opening password. These were the pieces of evidence that proved the chamber and the basilisk. Once they were destroyed, the prophet might think his prophecy was wrong and relax his vigilance. In fact, he succeeded. I fell for it at the time. Avada sighed. I also told Dumbledore about the basilisk's existence, which is why there were the chickens in the portraits at the start of the year. I suspect those chickens convinced the diary the prophet really existed. Then came the fainting incidents. Those were a masterstroke. Not only did they successfully drive Dumbledore away, they also confused the prophet, making him think the basilisk in his prophecy had become something else, which led him to a series of wrong judgments. Well done, Tom. Perhaps after driving Dumbledore away and getting Snape into position, the decision to have the basilisk appear immediately and begin attacking, besides its mission to eliminate Muggleborns, also served to show off to that panicked prophet. Then they tampered with the basilisk's eyes and ears, shifting responsibility for killing Muggleborns to the chamber will, which intimidated everyone, smeared Dumbledore further, and hid the basilisk's existence. 3 birds with 1 stone. When there were few people in the castle at Christmas, they could strike at the biggest threat, me, this prophet. That's the full scope of the conspiracy. Any additions, Tom? Avada tapped the box that contained the diary, letting Tom's voice be transmitted outward. Tom simply closed his eyes, pale and refusing to speak. Avada looked satisfied at the mix of astonishment, fear, and despair in the diary's mental state, then sealed the box again. Once these key points are understood, we can think about how to deal with him. If you understand how the opponent thinks, it's easy to counter him. Since the basilisk is his reliance, make him think the basilisk has a problem. Since he thinks his opponent is a prophet, give him another explanation to make him doubt his previous judgment. Since he's cunning and hyper-vigilant, give him a difficult problem to occupy his mind so he can't notice flaws or watch his surroundings. That's what we did at Christmas. Fake a basilisk attack, have me impersonate a diary of his kind to gain trust, and give him the task of bringing Dumbledore back so he'd be constantly racking his brains. And to make it convincing, I had Harry, who can speak Parseltongue, disguise himself as me using Polyjuice Potion. Coincidentally, we had Polyjuice. With me secretly transmitting my voice while hidden beside him, having him repeat what I said in Parseltongue, and using a few props, we fooled the diary straight away. Avada smiled at the figure beside Baron. At some point, the other Avada had melted and warped like a wax effigy and turned back into Harry Potter. And by chance, Fred and George had a small locating device, and because of the previous basilisk attacks, we had already emptied Hogwarts, avoiding interference. So by using that locator to see who approached Harry in the empty classroom, that person had to be the diary's host. And once we knew the host's identity, we could prepare the final blow. He recounted the whole operation proudly, how much wit-sharpening potion he'd drunk, how many brain cells he'd burned, how many connections he'd pulled together to design the trap. But honestly, I didn't expect it to go this smoothly. It's simply Merlin's blessing. He turned to Luna, who was listening intently beside him. Originally, the diary, having regained power and able to condense a body, could have changed hosts at any time. It could have possessed anyone, become a ghost among the students, and made my capture plans impossible. But for some reason, in the later fainting incidents, when it possessed Miss Luna Lovegood, it seemed trapped and unable to change hosts anymore. That was discovered thanks to the twins' observations with that small device. They had been trying to identify the culprit and recorded the names of people seen around each fainting scene. At first, the names around those incidents were random, but in the last few attacks, Luna Lovegood's name appeared every single time. When we finally lured the diary out and the locator still showed Luna Lovegood approaching Harry, we could confirm the diary was trapped in Luna. So, how did you do it? All eyes turned to the small blonde girl sitting on the ground. She suddenly looked nervous. Black rackspurts, she said, timidly pointing at her head. At that time, I often saw black rackspurts buzzing around me. They're the strongest kind. My brain was under severe attack. Whenever I saw them, I would warn those around me and ask a professor for help, and then I'd lose a large chunk of memory and see more black rackspurts. After that went on for several days, that thing finally took complete control of me, occupying my mind and not leaving. After that, I was always in a daze, as if watching my body move on its own. To be honest, it was a rather novel feeling. Avada scratched his head, not expecting the truth to be like that. It was Luna's strange mental ability that had trapped the diary, and Luna was also a half-blood, so the diary couldn't break its own rules to petrify her without causing panic. Forced to control Luna long-term, it lost its ability to switch hosts. The diary had been truly unlucky. Avada glanced at Luna, who was nervously poking her fingers together, then at the faces around him, probably wondering what rack spurts were, and felt like laughing. Fine. Everyone had been crucial in this fight. Harry's parcel tongue, Ron and Hermione's polyjuice, the twins' map, Baron's early warning device, Snape's official cooperation, and Luna's mental resistance. He hadn't done it alone. Well done, Ken, and everyone. A burst of crimson flame suddenly flashed nearby, and an old man stepped through it, smiling. Albus Dumbledore had returned. Surprisingly, he was carrying an unconscious figure in his arms, platinum hair tumbling down and swaying. Lucius Malfoy. Professor? Everyone jumped at Dumbledore's sudden appearance. Snape merely snorted, shot Lucius a faint look, and said, "Finally caught him?" "It's been a while, actually." Dumbledore chuckled as he set the unconscious Lucius on the floor, then turned to the cluster of students watching him. His smile broadened. "Thank you all. Well done. Calling you heroes who saved Hogwarts would be putting it mildly. Your extraordinary work in crushing Lord Voldemort's plot and exposing the stubborn pure-blood cabal has, to a large extent, saved the wizarding community and the future of all Muggle-born witches and wizards. If we were to reward you strictly according to your contributions, not only would the 4 house hourglasses overflow, but even this year's quotas for the Order of Merlin would likely prove insufficient." Avada accepted the praise with a calm smile. Baron took a small step back, but his grin betrayed him. Harry and Ron looked foolishly pleased. Hermione and Luna blushed and awkwardly fidgeted. The Weasley twins whooped and slapped each other on the back with far too much enthusiasm. "And thank you for the information you provided, Ken." Dumbledore pointed to Lucius on the ground. Lucius here was the provider of key information. The detail about Grindelwald's descendant was enough for the diary to infer far too much. It hit the mark by coincidence. Avada and Baron's eyes both twitched. Heaven knew how Mr. Shafaki's offhand remark had set off such a chain of events. If Avada had been an ordinary person, it might have been nothing. But the problem was, he had the sort of fate that drew attention. For something like the diary, which had already noticed the oddities from last semester, the phrase Grindelwald's descendant could almost immediately mark Avada as prophetic and trigger a whole series of responses. Without that slip, who knew what conclusions the diary might have reached? As for Lucius, Dumbledore continued, he knew far too much and, as a key contact and coordinator for those conspirators, was ordered by Lord Voldemort to go into hiding at the start of the year. Not even his accomplices knew where he was. Voldemort feared someone would capture Lucius and read his memories and thus learn the truth. He underestimated people's ingenuity. Sometimes a sharp mind is worth more than legilimency or prophecy. My principal task during this time was to locate Lucius and take control of him before he could erase his own memories. He glanced at Avada, who scratched his head. "So," Avada pointed at Lucius, trying to shift the tone. "Could Lucius's memories be used as evidence to dismantle the pureblood faction? I remember that memories extracted by legilimency or veritaserum can't be used as direct legal evidence, right?" "Exactly." Dumbledore nodded. "Skilled wizards can fake such things easily, so they're only useful as investigative leads, and powerful pureblood families care least about investigations. Then you? So I prepared for that as well." With a theatrical flick of his hand, a large suitcase appeared in a burst of fire. Dumbledore set it floating open and let them look inside. A mountain of letters, ledgers, orders, bills for materials bought to forge evidence, correspondence between pureblood families, secret commands to the investigation team, and internal documents from the institution that identified the Erklings. It was a mess of damning material. "You can't expect me to have done nothing before obtaining Lucius's intelligence, Ken," he said. "How did you get all this?" The students crowded around, flipping through the complete files in disbelief. It was hard to imagine how Dumbledore had retrieved such paperwork from under the noses of those families. "It wasn't as difficult as you might think," Dumbledore replied with a laugh, letting them examine the documents. "A bit of clever magic, a little polite persuasion, and most importantly, Professor Snape provided a great deal of crucial information. He saved me a tremendous amount of time and effort." Snape, Avada, Baron, and even Harry looked up in astonishment. Snape's expression didn't change much, but the corners of his mouth twitched. "You swore an unbreakable vow," someone blurted. Dumbledore grinned mischievously and rolled up his sleeve. There, on his arm, were the branded marks of several binding threads. "You didn't guess?" he said. "I thought that would be the easiest deduction given how clever you've been and how you used Polyjuice in so many unexpected ways." Polyjuice? As the others processed, Avada's eyes lit up. "You mean, exactly." Dumbledore's face turned into the grin of an old rogue. It wasn't Professor Snape who made the unbreakable vow and tied himself to those families. It was me, while under Polyjuice potion. After I was expelled, I traveled to France and worked with my old friend Nicholas Flamel for several months to remove the vow. The unbreakable vow is indeed one of the most powerful magical contracts, but the methods used are ancient, somewhat crude. Fortunately, Nicholas and I have a good grasp of archaic magics. He smiled with a little pride. Between the two of us, there are very few spells we cannot break. Even so, dissolving that vow cost me greatly. I might have been an old man, but I nearly cried from the pain. Fortunately, I'm still relatively hale. Avada scoffed inwardly. Living a year under the Resurrection Stone's curse, forcibly breaking an unbreakable vow, and taking down a room full of aurors, relatively hale seemed an odd boast. Dumbledore tugged his beard, noticing the odd looks, and continued more sedately. "Professor Snape infiltrated their ranks and fed us vital intelligence. That, and the things you accomplished out in the open, have been more than enough." Snape, who had been unable to restrain himself any longer, cut through Dumbledore's modesty with a clipped, cold remark. "You forgot one thing, Dumbledore." Dumbledore feigned surprise, patted his own head, and glanced down at the suitcase in Avada's hands. "Oh, right. Next on the list is dealing with that basilisk. Target, secret room." Target, secret room. Can you hand me the box you're holding?" Dumbledore looked at Avada. "I need to have a good chat with that diary. Make it tell me the location of the Chamber of Secrets and how to open it." "You can do that?" Avada asked, handing over the box with some curiosity. He was dying to see what Dumbledore meant by a good chat. Dumbledore took the parcel, probed the many layers of tape with a fingertip, and the reinforcing magic woven into the tape vanished the instant he touched it. He turned the box this way and that, found the tape's end, and began to pick at it with his nail. It didn't budge. He cleared his throat, tapped the box, and the tape peeled away on its own with a crisp rip. With his wand in one hand and the box lid in the other, he opened it. The moment the diary was exposed, Dumbledore struck it with a spell so swift and precise no one could follow it. The diary, which had been shivering and exhaling wisps of black mist from between its pages, went instantly silent. Dumbledore then had the diary float in front of him. He closed his eyes slightly, pointed his wand, and remained utterly still, like a statue of magic. Around him, people exchanged puzzled glances. Snape watched the diary intently, wand gripped tight, and Avada watched too, utterly absorbed. Through his magical senses, Avada could see Dumbledore's legilimency mercilessly tearing down the diary's mental defenses, reading its memories in the most direct and brutal way. It was unbelievable. Avada had studied the Horcrux's defenses before. He'd estimated that even with his magical senses following in real time, it would take him half a day to break through. Dumbledore had done it in far less, certainly under 10 seconds. He was still staring when someone poked him. "Tsk, who?" He turned, annoyed, to meet a swarm of curious faces. Luna Lovegood, who had prodded him, whispered, "Is it true what you said earlier, that you're descended from Gellert Grindelwald?" Avada scanned the open curiosity on everyone's faces, everyone except Baron and Snape, and felt suddenly nauseated by how he must look. In his own eyes, he was just a transmigrator who'd read the original story, given a ridiculous name by the Ministry, of mediocre talent but with a cheat. In everyone else's eyes, he'd become a mysterious figure, his full name hidden by Dumbledore, astonishingly gifted, thought by powerful people like Voldemort and Lucius to be a descendant of Grindelwald. He almost convinced himself he must be related to Grindelwald. "Of course that's not true," he said. "I have no relation to Grindelwald. My name is hidden for other reasons." He rolled his eyes. "But the prophet thing, well, that part used to be true." "Used to?" Luna pressed. "Do you remember I fainted in divination class before all the others did?" Avada smiled sadly. "Back then, I might have glimpsed some forbidden things Professor Trelawney warned about and suffered a terrible backlash. After that, I lost the prophetic ability. I don't have it anymore." He was telling the truth. After that incident, the backlash had been severe. The plot had changed so completely after his interference that there was nothing left to predict. If prophecy still worked for him, he wouldn't have been so easily tricked by the diary in the first place. Before anyone could react, Dumbledore spoke quietly. "All right." He closed his wand, placed the now dull diary back into the box, his eyes briefly dim with memory. "I have what I wanted, so that is what happened 50 years ago." "No, that!" Dumbledore shook his head as if to correct himself, but his voice remained grave. "The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is that abandoned girl's lavatory. It must be opened in Parseltongue. The original command was open, but it has been changed to Hail Lord Voldemort." "That place," Harry stared at Avada in disbelief. "Isn't that where you first showed me how to use Parseltongue? You knew where the chamber was from the start?" Avada gave Harry a pained look. "Please stop talking. Can't you see how suspicious everyone else already is?" If this continued, Grindelwald would personally come looking for him. "Fawkes," Dumbledore said. He looked up as if to himself. "Bring everyone here." A ball of flame ignited from nowhere in front of them, and a stream of figures emerged from it. Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Professor Sprout, Professor Kettleburn, and Hagrid. In truth, there weren't so many, but Hagrid's size led to a few miscounts. "Is it over?" McGonagall asked, still a little dazed, glancing between Dumbledore and the people behind him. "Almost." Dumbledore smiled faintly. "Now the only thing left is to kill that basilisk. I know the entrance. Come with me." "I'll have Fawkes peck out the basilisk's eyes first, and then—" "Don't do that, Albus," Kettleburn protested, stepping forward with his wooden arm waving. "Those are the basilisk's eyes. A basilisk that might not be seen for centuries. Its eyes are the most valuable specimens for research. If we could get intact basilisk eyes, we might find a way to reverse the petrifications quickly," Professor Sprout added. Several of the professors looked expectant. The creature was too rare and valuable to destroy even in part. Dumbledore sighed and nodded reluctantly. "Then close your eyes and use a heightened sensory spell, or fight blindly. Take these." He waved his wand and conjured a pile of pure black spectacles. "Wear these over your eyes so you can't accidentally meet the basilisk's gaze." At that, the Weasley twins bounded forward, excited. Pulling 2 clear pairs of glasses from their pockets, they cried, "We'll wear these. We've always wanted to know what it feels like to be petrified." "Mr. Weasley." McGonagall shot them a murderous look, but Dumbledore raised a hand and smiled. "You may, if you wish, but be warned, any homework missed during your petrification will have to be made up." Fred and George exchanged a glance and then, with difficulty, agreed. "Fine." "All right, Mr. Weasley. Is there anyone else who wants to visit the chamber? There's no danger as long as you don't meet the basilisk's eyes. Just a tour inside." Hands went up all around. "Very well. Professor Snape, take Lockhart to the Ministry of Magic first. Also take the recording Shafake made. Have the Ministry process it. Then meet us at the entrance to the lavatory." Snape inclined his head, took the recording device from Baron's hand, and with a cold motion summoned the ashen-faced Lockhart to levitate over. He grabbed Lockhart by the collar with one hand, reached out to Fawkes with the other, and then they vanished in a flash of fire. "Well then, everyone, let's go," Dumbledore said, striding toward the abandoned lavatory, his distinctive, powerful wand held firmly in hand. The professors, each taking a pair of black glasses, followed him. The students exchanged looks, then, led by the twins, who had already put their shades on at some point, fell in behind in a noisy procession. "Hey, Harry," Fred urged, Want to find out what it's like to be petrified with the rest of us? Otherwise, those glasses will be a waste. No thanks. Harry's face went cold at the memory of Dumbledore's earlier remark about homework, and he shook his head quickly. I don't want to end up having to secretly catch up on a mountain of homework under Uncle Vernon's nose. But that's a basilisk, Fred persisted. You might never see one in your whole life, let alone be petrified by one. How many people in the history of magic have been petrified by a basilisk? Maybe we'll make history. Harry scratched his head, slightly bewildered. A basilisk? Rare? I talked to one for 3 whole days before, you know. He thought for a moment. Besides, I don't really need to make history that way. The twins glanced at one another, fell silent, and without another word followed the professors. Oh, right. Maybe we need one for Luna, too. It'd be a problem if the basilisk wasn't all the way in the chamber, but hiding at the entrance to ambush us. Avada, cutting off a corner of his robe with a quick, practiced motion, transfigured it into a pair of glasses and slipped them on. Others did the same. He conjured another pair and handed them to Luna. She was only a first year, not yet practiced at transfiguration, and a large portion of her memories from the past 6 months had been erased by the Horcrux diary. The next semester looked like it might be difficult for her. By then, the group had reached the lavatory entrance. Dumbledore stood staring at the inconspicuous little snake carving on the sink faucet, while Myrtle cowered in her toilet, trembling at the sight of such a crowd of powerful professors. Boom! A flash of fire erupted at the lavatory entrance, startling everyone. Severus Snape stepped out of the blaze, wand in hand, Fawkes the Phoenix perched on his shoulder. The Phoenix flapped, half flew and half hopped over onto Dumbledore's shoulder. Excellent! Everyone is here, Dumbledore said. He turned to Snape and nodded. All professors, please put on your glasses and stay ready. Fawkes, keep watch. Fawkes gave a clear cry and vanished in another flash of fire. The professors produced the black opaque glasses Dumbledore had handed out and slipped them on. In their serious expressions, formal black robes, and the items clutched in their hands, a group of distinguished academics were transformed, at least in Avada's eyes, into a band of somber, battle-ready bosses. He had to fight hard not to laugh. Harry, Dumbledore's voice grew grave. Please open the Chamber of Secrets. The password is Long Live Lord Voldemort. Yes, Professor. Harry moved through the cluster of sunglasses-clad professors and stood at the sink, staring at the tiny snake carving. He steadied his breath and let out a low, cold series of hisses. The faucet flared with a dazzling white light and began to spin. The sink shifted aside, revealing a thick, human-sized pipe leading into darkness. From Avada's perspective, the structures he'd been studying, the strange, soul-like components he'd suspected, underwent astonishing changes at Harry's words. They rearranged and opened, connecting the inner space with the outside and forming a passable channel. How magical, he thought, rubbing his temples. He half understood the incredibly complex transformation. Months of research into soul magic had given him new insights. Perhaps it was related to Dumbledore's Fidelius charm. Maybe he could study it further at Grimmauld Place next year. Fawkes has sent word. There's no danger inside, Dumbledore said, beckoning. Hagrid, Madame Pomfrey, after we go in, I'll trouble you two to guard the entrance so no students stumble in by accident. Yes, Professor, they answered. Hagrid's bulk and Pomfrey's build made them sensible choices for guarding the outside. They wouldn't fit into the narrow pipe anyway. All right, everyone, keep your glasses on. With that, Dumbledore leapt into the pipe first, followed quickly by the others. The twins were impatient and jumped in next. Avada followed. It felt like sliding down a long, dark, slimy chute, twisting, turning, the pipe descending steeply. He could hear the faint thumps and muffled exclamations of others as they rounded the bends. As the slope flattened, they were suddenly shot out of the pipe like cannonballs into a vast, echoing chamber. The twins hooped and spun until Professor McGonagall hauled them to a halt and used a cleaning charm to remove the moss and mire clinging to their robes. There are a lot of small animal bones here. Professor Kettleburn ducked his head, peering around. Seems there's an odd little ecosystem down here, but those bones don't match a basilisk's appetite, so it must spend most of its time in hibernation. Heavens! What is that? Merlin's beard, a complete basilisk skin, someone cried. Hagrid will be ecstatic. No, any magizoologist would be. I wouldn't dare show Newt. He might drop dead with excitement. All right, Sylvanus, control yourself, Dumbledore said, patting Kettleburn on the wooden shoulder. Don't forget there's a whole basilisk waiting for us further in. Let's move on. Harry, could you come here again? There's another door ahead that requires Parseltongue. The password hasn't been changed. Just say open. Right. Harry trotted forward, eyes bright with curiosity. He faced the impressive doorway entwined with two carved snakes and hissed. The door split down the middle and opened to reveal a long, dim hall lined with tall stone pillars carved in coiling serpents, the ceiling dissolving into shadow high above. At the far end stood a stone statue of an old, monkey-faced wizard with a thin, long beard. Coiled at the statue's feet was a vast, greenish-blue beast. The thing opened its massive, terrifying eyes at the sound and instantly looked straight toward the twins, giving them exactly what they had come for. Everyone else managed to avoid the basilisk's gaze. The basilisk hissed in Parseltongue. It perked up the moment it sensed several unfamiliar presences, its instincts telling it that prey had walked straight into its lair. It fixed a lethal, icy gaze on the leading figure and emitted low, dangerous hisses. Its sharp fangs flashed like knives. The whole animal coiled like a spring, every muscle tensed in a terrifying, ready-to-strike posture, as if it would lunge and swallow those smaller creatures in the next heartbeat. Thump! The solid floor beneath it rippled and became water, and the basilisk toppled in. The water closed over it, and in an instant hardened back into stone, burying the creature and pinning it immovably beneath the chamber's floor. A pebble nearby changed into a length of black cloth and flew up, wrapping tightly around the basilisk's eyes. I think it's safe to open our eyes now, Professor McGonagall said, setting down her wand and taking off her sunglasses. Well done, Minerva, Dumbledore replied. The other professors removed their own sunglasses and hurried forward, examining the trapped serpent without restraint. Finding the basilisk half buried, Professor Flitwick caused thick coils of metal to grow from the earth and wind around its body, lifting it up as if placing a specimen on display in a museum. It looked utterly undignified. Children, come and see. The basilisk is no longer dangerous, Professor Sprout called cheerfully, and the students who had been hiding by the great door shuffled in, puzzled. They took in the chamber around them, confirming in stunned silence that they were, indeed, standing in the Chamber of Secrets and not some exhibition hall. Professor? Harry asked uncertainly, pointing to the creature secured on the frame. Is that the basilisk? Yes, Professor Sprout answered kindly. The giant beast that survived since Slytherin's time, the most dangerous magical creature of its kind, Tom Riddle's great weapon, the thing that petrified students. That thing? Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Luna exchanged incredulous looks. And it was dealt with in just a few moves? How many moves did you expect, Mr. Potter? Professor Sprout chuckled. No matter how long-lived or deadly a magical creature is, it's still a creature. It has a limited repertoire of abilities and, apart from being powerful, it's just that, a creature. We are wizards, Mr. Potter. Wizards are at the top of the magical hierarchy, Avada added matter-of-factly. A couple of faces turned to him. Avada and Baron had seen top wizards in action 2 years earlier and were unruffled. Avada even explained while idly fiddling with the twin statue near the entrance. We have higher mental capacities than most magical beasts, the ability to learn any magic, a full system of magical theory, and all kinds of supporting disciplines. Beasts aren't really a match for us, except that they can look frightening. Most attacks you hear about happen because people were unprepared or surprised, Baron added. Our professors knew the basilisk's traits and attacked proactively. It's hard to see how they could have failed. Watching Harry and the others slowly process this, Avada nodded with satisfaction and strolled back toward the basilisk with Baron and Professor Sprout, chatting casually as they went. That move Professor McGonagall used, wasn't it like what you used on me in the dueling club? Someone said. Exactly, Avada replied. A technique a weak third year could dodge was enough to take down the basilisk. Professor, how would you have dealt with it? I'd probably use something similar, Professor Sprout said. It's the simplest approach. If I were feeling creative, I might try planting seeds or spores in the creature and stimulating them with magic. Devil's snare might be quite effective. Avada and Baron shivered at the thought. Nearby, Professor Kettleburn was positively giddy. "I'd wager this basilisk is over 1,000 years old," he exclaimed as he ran his hands over the scales. "And these fangs! Pieces of art!" He pried the metal frame open to examine the mouth, fondling the fangs as if they were relics, then produced a collection of jars and started harvesting venom and saliva. He even risked pulling back the blindfold to cast a spell and collect the creature's tears. "All right, everyone." Dumbledore clapped his hands to get their attention, bringing the professors and the gleeful Kettleburn to a halt. "It's time to put it down. We'll have the whole school see its corpse first, then you may research it as you please." The professors exchanged looks. "But don't damage the body," Kettleburn protested. "If you ruin the specimen now, we'll lose so much. Hagrid and I can handle the dissection. Perhaps we could invite Newt Scamander or Charlie, too. They'd be thrilled." The idea of preserving a complete basilisk stirred unanimous agreement. Snape weighed his wand in his hand. "We could use that spell," he suggested quietly. "Which one?" the others asked blankly. He nodded toward Avada, who was still chatting with Baron, and gave a frantic, conspiratorial wink. The implication was clear, even if the word wasn't spoken. There was a moment of hesitation, but the professors could not resist the chance of an intact specimen. They agreed. "Children, please step outside for a moment," Professor McGonagall said, ushering them back toward the chamber entrance. She moved the twin statue into place to block the way, and to be safe, cast a sound-dampening charm over the doorway, before returning to stand with the others and raising her wand. From where Harry and the others waited, they couldn't hear what the professors murmured. They only saw 6 thick shafts of green light spring from the raised wands and slam into the basilisk's head. The great body, which had been twitching and straining faintly, went utterly still. "That should do it." Professor Flitwick wiped his wand as if it had been stained, then slowly lowered the steel supports and gently set the basilisk's enormous body on the stone floor. "Merlin's beard. This feeling is," he trailed off, visibly disturbed. Professor McGonagall and Professor Sprout both frowned. As teachers who dealt with underage students every day and who did not teach defense against the dark arts, they were as far from dark magic as one could be, and the thought of a curse like the killing curse left them queasy. Their skill let them cast it, perhaps, but the sensation of using such a thing was revolting. "Right, at least we have a complete basilisk," Sprout said with forced cheer. Kettleburn, who had looked pale a moment before, brightened the instant he saw the creature. He began running excited little circles around it. "Any particular parts you want me to save when I dissect it?" he asked, practically vibrating. "Blood, venom," said Snape at once. He remained expressionless after whatever curse had been used, completely unruffled. "And the eyes, the optic nerves, some of the epidermis as well." Flitwick perked up at the mention of the basilisk's anatomy and actually counted off items on his fingers. "I want an eye, too. I'll need the magic itself as a reference to speed up the antidote, to help the petrified students recover sooner," Professor Sprout added quickly. McGonagall blinked. She had wanted an eye as well. "In that case, I'll take some bones and flesh first," she said. She glanced at Pomona beside her. "Pomona, once you've finished with the eyeball, you must lend it to me. I have some transfiguration experiments that might need a powerful petrification reference." "No problem," Pomona replied cheerfully. The horror of the killing curse couldn't dampen her enthusiasm for a real basilisk. As the professors grew more fervent, practically egging Kettleburn on toward an immediate autopsy, Dumbledore cleared his throat to restore order. "The dissection will have to wait," he said. "We should display the basilisk to the whole school first, to reassure everyone. We may even announce it publicly. By the time it's ready for detailed research, it'll be nearly the end of term." A collective sigh of disappointment went through the staff. Dumbledore smiled and added, "However, to help the petrified students recover as quickly as possible, I think it reasonable to remove a single eye for research before the display." There was a chorus of relieved murmurs. "But that eye must be prioritized for research," Dumbledore continued. "Pomona, Severus, with the basilisk eye as a reference, how long until you could develop an antidote?" It depends on the complexity of the enchantment, but it shouldn't take more than 3 months, Sprout said after a moment's thought. Snape gave a curt nod. Another round of sighs. To possess a priceless basilisk eye and be forbidden to use it for weeks felt like torture. Dumbledore watched their unprofessional enthusiasm with amusement. "Don't forget," he said, "there's also a full basilisk hide at the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, and Kettleburn will be salvaging venom and blood when he preserves the carcass. Those materials should keep you busy until the eye is available." "Oh," more contented murmurs. Outside the chamber, a group of students pressed against the soundproof barrier, watching the professors behave like possessed auctioneers through the shield. They fidgeted and whispered as the adults on the other side swung between dejection and glee. "What are they even talking about?" Harry asked, glancing at Hermione. "Who knows?" Hermione rolled her eyes. More important, Ron handed a pen to Avada, jogged over to Baron, poked him, and whispered urgently, "Do you still have that thing for recording Lockhart?" Baron started. "No. Why?" "I want to record Snape and loop it in the common room," Ron said. Avada, busy drawing a niffler on one of the twins' faces, turned and adopted a mocking, high-pitched voice. "The common room? No. This is a Great Hall-level operation. If anyone's brave, you play it for the entire school." "Exactly," Ron said, eyes alight. "Imagine the whole school laughing while Fred and George get a few years of detention for good measure. If they do that, I'll wake up laughing for weeks." Baron looked at them sideways. "Only brothers say things like that," he muttered. Avada handed the pen back and kept doodling. Just then, the soundproofing barrier opened. Professor McGonagall stepped through, intending to tell them to get ready to go back, but she froze when she saw the twins' faces decorated with turtles and nifflers. The words died on her lips. One by one, the other professors emerged. Kettleburn, ever a child at heart, had stuck a tiny fire lizard on George's cheek, then with a flourish levitated it into a pocket Dumbledore produced with an undetectable extension charm. "That should do it," he said, pleased. Dumbledore conjured Fawkes and smiled. "Fawkes can take you back now. In pairs, hold on to one another's arms." The Phoenix's red flames flickered in the dim Chamber of Secrets. Fawkes could send out a pair of people about every 2 seconds. Soon everyone who had entered the chamber was standing again at the entrance to the abandoned girls' lavatory. "Oh, Professor Dumbledore!" Hagrid rushed forward the moment his head appeared. "You're back! The basilisk!" "It's been dealt with," Dumbledore said, stroking his beard with a gentle smile. "We'll take care of the corpse and display it in the Great Hall for all the students to see. I'll leave the preservation to you and Sylvanas." "No problem, Professor." Hagrid's voice rose with excitement. Dumbledore's expression turned serious for a heartbeat. "I've also managed to clear up what happened 50 years ago and found some evidence. You may well be cleared, Hagrid." "For me?" Hagrid's eyes went huge. "And Madame Pomfrey," Hagrid added, suddenly remembering. "When searching Malfoy Manor, I found a house elf, presumably belonging to the Malfoys. He was clothed, with his memories wiped. I don't know how long he'd been without food or water. He was unconscious and near death in a cellar. He's in the hospital wing now." "Thank you," Madame Pomfrey said softly. "I'll look after him." Dumbledore took a steadying breath. The smile left his face, and a colder light came into his eyes. "It is time for those who harmed the school to answer for what they have done." It felt like an explosion. Hogwarts and the whole of British Wizarding Society were set alight at once. It began that Christmas when the students who stayed in the castle for the holidays cautiously filed into the Great Hall for dinner and froze at the sight of a 50-foot basilisk suspended from the ceiling. Then, as if that were not enough, Albus Dumbledore, missing for months, reappeared and told them that Slytherin had not won the House Cup, but that the creature which had been petrifying students had at last been killed. News spread through the school that night. Those who had been hiding away in their common rooms poured into the Great Hall to look at the enormous corpse. Finally, there could be no doubt. A basilisk, not some chamber will manufactured by the Board of Governors, had been responsible for the petrifications. The Muggle-born students who had been angry and hurt felt their disappointment wash away and were seized instead by the relief of surviving a catastrophe. Dumbledore unexpectedly lifted the curfew that night, and the whole school celebrated in the Great Hall until dawn. The next day, letters went out to the students who had left Hogwarts for the holidays, each enclosing a striking photograph of the basilisk's corpse and assuring them that it was safe to return. At the same time, the Daily Prophet led with an explosive front page that sent a storm of public opinion across Britain and into the rest of Europe. Hogwarts student attack cases solved. Ancient basilisk appears in castle. You-know-who not dead yet? Below the headline were photographs. The corpse hanging above the Great Hall, a number of ancient, eerie rooms, and a massive statue of Salazar Slytherin found in some unknown chamber. The article explained the basics of a basilisk and briefly recounted the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. Then it dropped the bigger revelations. Dumbledore, the paper reported, had returned to the Ministry and Wizengamot with an astonishingly complete chain of evidence. He accused 7 of the 12 Hogwarts Board of Governors of intentionally harming students and of secretly possessing and misusing dark artifacts. According to him, the catastrophe had been set off by a relic left behind by you-know-who. Lucius Malfoy, one of the governors, knowing what the item was, had brought it into the school in secret. The relic reawakened the basilisk, which then attacked the students. Dumbledore's accusations did not stop there. He provided evidence that the Hogwarts student coma incident from the previous November had not been caused by Erklings in the pipes at all, but by a dark artifact, one of you-know-who's relics, exerting control over a particular student. That student, under the artifact's influence and with an invisibility cloak and other dark tools obtained from members of the board, had attacked students to manufacture a crisis and force Dumbledore from the castle. The prophet reproduced some of the physical evidence Dumbledore supplied. A dark artifact that looked to be made from withered mandrake, letters exchanged between governors, paperwork exposing a dubious institution that had misidentified the so-called mutated Erklings, and other documents tying the accused to these schemes. "I feel disappointed and angry," Dumbledore told the reporter. "I know my remarks last year may have worried some people, but I never imagined they would stoop to such monstrous measures, attacking innocent children to frame me, seeking to deprive all Muggle-born students of their right to an education, and endangering the entire magical community." He stressed the human cost. The students who had been put into comas had missed at least a month of their studies. The petrified students would need at least 2 months to recover, meaning the unluckiest had lost as much as 3 months of classes. Many of those affected were in their 4th and 5th years. Dumbledore warned he feared serious implications for their OWLs and, by extension, their futures. He also publicly thanked Severus Snape, the current headmaster and potions professor, for providing intelligence during Dumbledore's absence and for doing everything he could to protect the students. Dumbledore acknowledged Snape may have made unpopular choices, but asked that students recognize his efforts. The governors Dumbledore had accused were in Auror custody, and a trial date was set for a month hence. Dumbledore had even sought to reopen an old case from 50 years earlier, the inquiry into Rubeus Hagrid, then the Hogwarts gamekeeper, who had once been prosecuted after a dangerous creature he kept allegedly killed a student. Hagrid had avoided Azkaban when Dumbledore put up bail. The matter, Dumbledore suggested, deserved fresh scrutiny in light of the new evidence. Hogwarts is unique, the school where nearly every witch and wizard in Britain has studied, one of only 11 such institutions in the world, so every move associated with it was bound to attract attention. The revelation of a basilisk living in the castle, the injured and petrified children, and the news that governors had endangered students for their own ends set the entire magical community ablaze. Old wounds and debates reemerged, references to blood purity and the board's earlier attempts to expel Muggle-born students dogged the headlines, and those doctrines were largely condemned across the public sphere. In the rush of reaction and outrage, smaller items at the margins of the paper were easily overlooked. Renowned author Gilderoy Lockhart accused of intentional harm and misuse of memory charms. The truth behind the Chamber of Secrets 50 years on, a chilling glimpse of you-know-who's early crimes. Hogwarts Board of Governors to be restructured, Dumbledore reinstated as principal. and a triumphant-sounding piece. You know whose arch-nemesis. The students who sealed him have thwarted his conspiracy once more. 156. Dobby's new job. The Christmas holiday ended in turmoil, at least in the wider wizarding world. Hogwarts itself was brightly decorated, as if celebrating the season without a care. Students who had gone home had received letters about the basilisk attack, and many, especially the Muggle-borns, returned unsettled. The repeated attacks and Dumbledore's temporary absence had badly shaken the school's reputation in their minds. But when they filed back into the Great Hall and saw the huge corpse of the basilisk affixed to the enchanted ceiling and a smiling Dumbledore sitting at the headmaster's table, most of their fears evaporated. At the end of Holiday Feast, Dumbledore rose to explain the events of the past half-year to teachers and students and to soothe the school's anger before it boiled over. He announced that all the members of the Board of Governors implicated in the plot had been expelled from the board and were now under Auror custody awaiting trial. He urged the students not to take their anger out on the children of those governors. To make that point more palatable, he bent the truth slightly, claiming, falsely, that the children of the implicated governors, like Marcus and Pansy, had been unaware of their parents' plans and were effectively victims, since the conspirators had not hesitated to endanger their own children to lend credibility to the attacks. Whether or not that was accurate, the statement produced immediate sympathy for students such as Marcus and Pansy, who had been targeted during the incidents of sudden unconsciousness, and it strengthened the students' horror at the governor's cold-heartedness. Those like Draco Malfoy, who had not been attacked and had made themselves conspicuous during the basilisk's rampage, were left to their own devices. With Gilderoy Lockhart under arrest, Dumbledore announced that Defense Against the Dark Arts classes for the second semester would be taught on a rotation by Professors McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, and Snape. "And one more thing," Dumbledore said, and clapped his hands to draw attention. "I should also address Professor Severus Snape's conduct while he served as acting headmaster." He told the hall that Snape had been in close contact with him during that time and had investigated and compiled much of the evidence against the corrupted governors. Snape, Dumbledore said, had performed his duties diligently and had done his best to protect teachers and students. For example, Dumbledore continued, it was Professor Snape's suggestion to place covers over the basilisk's eyes to limit its lethality and prevent fatalities. He argued against the Board of Governors' original plan to expel all Muggle-born students outright and worked to ensure they received only verbal expulsions rather than permanent removal, and his cooperation was essential in the operation to lure that dark object. Dumbledore looked once at Snape, who sat with his usual stony expression, then addressed the students. "So, although Professor Snape may have spoken harshly to some of you in the past, that was a product of circumstances. Do not let it cloud your judgment. I have decided to retain Professor Snape as Potions Master and head of Slytherin House." A murmur rippled through the hall, half indignation, half relief, and then, guided subtly by a few trusted teachers scattered among the students, a smattering of applause rose. Dumbledore's face lightened. "I have more good news. Having killed the basilisk and recovered its magical eyes for research, Professor Snape and Professor Sprout believe they can develop an antidote to reverse the petrifications. They estimate full recoveries by March at the latest." The hall erupted, and Dumbledore raised his voice to be heard over the cheering. "As for the classes missed and the 5th and 7th year exams, we will provide special tutoring suited to their circumstances. The Wizarding Examinations Authority has agreed to offer a special separate sitting of owls and newts for those affected. Their results will be recorded normally. Finally," he added, "several students made extraordinarily important contributions to capturing Lord Voldemort's dark object and killing the basilisk, contributions even more decisive than many of my own." Silence fell, and expectant eyes searched the hall. Dumbledore smiled. "To allow those students to continue their studies without undue attention, I have decided to conceal their identities for now. Their deeds will be made public at the end of the semester when the petrified students have recovered, and at the same time, we will announce the House Cup winner." There were disappointed groans, But the opening assembly soon ended, and students drifted away in twos and threes. Few returned straight to their common rooms. The castle still felt fragile. Filch remained petrified, after all, and for months his possible recovery had been the one thing that kept students from running wild. With the basilisk dead, caution lingered. In the Hufflepuff kitchen near the common room, Avada and a few other Hufflepuffs gathered around a house elf who was busily washing dishes with a flick of magic, wearing a clean bedsheet as his only garment. "How do you feel, Dobby?" one of them asked. "Dobby is very happy, sir," the elf chirped. Although Dobby cannot remember what it was like with his old master, Mr. Dumbledore told Dobby the master was called Malfoy. Dobby feels that life now is 10,000 times better. "That's good," Avada said, relieved. He asked with curiosity, "But why stay in the Hogwarts kitchen? Didn't you ever think of living on your own, free of service?" "Dobby is a free elf now," Dobby exclaimed. "Mr. Dumbledore has employed Dobby in the kitchens. He pays Dobby a salary and gives holidays. He says if Dobby is not happy, he may leave any time, but Dobby will not. Dobby likes it here very much." "An employed elf?" one of the Hufflepuffs said, fascinated. "Is that a thing?" "Considering he lost his master and his memories, employment makes sense. There wouldn't be much else," another argued. "Still, it sounds pretty good." "Hey, Dobby, how much do you get paid? And what about holidays?" someone else demanded, grabbing a dish and rolling up their sleeves to help with the washing. Dobby eagerly answered their questions as he grabbed tasks and chatted happily with the students. Avada stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the little scene with a small smile. It pleased him to see the elf so content. Quietly, he slipped away and left them to it. 157. The dust has settled. After that, Avada enjoyed the most peaceful stretch of his life since arriving at Hogwarts. There was no more mysterious wizard showing up to beg for help after failing to trap his main soul in a Horcrux, no Dark Lord demanding loyalty, no baffling cases to chew on, and, for the moment, no Dementors to break the calm. His mind could finally step away from endless calculations and return to the research he loved. Dumbledore had taken Tom Riddle's Horcrux diary for study, so Avada never got his hands on it, and his Horcrux research didn't advance that way. Surprisingly, though, Dumbledore left him a cache of basilisk material: bones, flesh, skin, nerves, even slices of brain, all delivered for his work. At Avada's request, Dumbledore also lent him the basilisk's eyes for a few days, which gave him a great deal of inspiration in curses and transfiguration. More important than the physical specimens was that Avada's soul perception ability from his first divination class could finally be put to good use. During the crisis in the Chamber of Secrets, he'd focused almost entirely on decoding the soul magic there. That magic was complicated, and a novice who'd only just learned to perceive souls could not expect to understand it quickly. Now, though, he could study souls more systematically, drawing on the Horcruxes, the Resurrection Stone, other people's souls, and the scattered soul knowledge in Professor Baker's books. After a few months of concentrated work, he gained a basic theory of soul magic and produced his first concrete result. He replicated Professor Baker's double casting technique at the soul level, and didn't stop there. He surpassed the original, truly achieving multitasking. Professor Baker's method had skirted the edge of a loophole, barely allowing the human mind to operate in a dual-threaded way for a very short time, so two different spells could be cast simultaneously. Once Avada had a preliminary model of the soul's structure, he found that dual-threaded, or even multi-threaded, thinking at the soul level was much simpler than he'd expected. It made sense. Horcruxes were the archetypal example of multi-threaded soul activity. The diary and Lord Voldemort were the same soul, yet they could produce different curses and act independently. There were even historical cases where a main soul was forced into conflict with its own Horcrux. He didn't name names. He also discovered that when a soul isn't split, multiple threads of thought still belong to a single consciousness. The consciousness doesn't fracture mid-thought, so the technique was safe to use. That came with a downside. Because the threads share one consciousness, they must also share the same processing power. That, he suspected, explained why Voldemort's intelligence declined with each soul splitting. The processing power available to each fragment shrank. As for why the diary could be so cunning, Avada guessed it might contain memories from Voldemort's most intelligent period, and thus remained untainted by later, diminished memories. But that was speculation without the diary to study. With this breakthrough, Avada's overall efficiency soared. During lessons, he could devote a small portion of his cognitive capacity to mastering the relatively simple third-year material, while the bulk of his attention continued his secret study of souls. That effectively increased his research time by an immeasurable amount. Outside the labs, Dumbledore's campaign against the recalcitrant pureblood faction finally produced results. In the ensuing trials, 5 of the 7 accused members of the Board of Governors were sentenced to Azkaban. Massive compensation was awarded to Hogwarts and to the students harmed, devastating the fortunes and social standing of the pureblood families involved. Lucius Malfoy, the second major culprit in the affair, again avoided prison. Dumbledore had shown that Voldemort's leftover dark arts objects could bewitch and even control minds. Lucius clung to that defense, insisting his actions had been controlled and not his own. He also claimed ignorance of the object in his home and had altered Dobby's memory, destroying key evidence. In the end, his only conviction was for illegal possession of dark objects. After a heavy fine and expulsion from the board, he escaped imprisonment. With 7 members removed, the board was reorganized. The remaining 5 governors became much more compliant, and representatives from 4 mid-sized pureblood families joined the board, reducing its size from 12 to 9 and affecting the school's funding. But the earlier compensation, combined with a large sum the Minister of Magic poured into Hogwarts to atone for nearly siding with the wrong party, kept the school solvent. Hagrid's case was also finally overturned. Dumbledore presented the Horcrux diary, confirmed by experts from the Department of Mysteries, along with Myrtle's testimony and the undeniable basilisk corpse. The Ministry and the Wizengamot agreed to clear Hagrid's name. His rights were restored, including the right to use a wand. Because it was true that he kept XXXX class acromantula at the school, his student status was not reinstated. He remained a dropout, but he was about to take over as professor of care of magical creatures anyway. That suited him perfectly. As long as he could serve Hogwarts and Dumbledore, he didn't care about formal status. After the petrified students were restored amid much wailing, the Weasley twins, faces painted with turtles and nifflers, chased Ron and Avada halfway across the castle in a flurry of practical jokes. In the exams that followed, Avada, the Bloody Baron, Cedric, and Hermione, as usual, took top marks in their respective years. At last, Hogwarts closed this tumultuous year and welcomed the long-awaited end-of-term feast. 158, Unprecedented College Cup. Excellent, everyone. Dumbledore beamed at the Great Hall packed with students. He rose and spread his arms toward them. Everyone is here, healthy and whole, able to enjoy a feast together and witness the awarding of the House Cup. Is there anything more delightful than this? It was July. Final exams had been over for some time, and the remedial lessons for those who had been petrified had been proceeding steadily for months. The last shadows left by the basilisk attack had been chased away, and the uproar that followed the governor's arrest had gradually died down. Hogwarts had returned to its usual lively bustle. Before I announce the winner of this year's House Cup, I must make one announcement, Dumbledore said, then added loudly. Professor Sylvanus Kettleburn is officially retiring and will no longer serve as Hogwarts' Professor of Care of Magical Creatures starting next semester. I believe you all know this already. So, would you like to say a few words, Sylvanus? Dumbledore asked with a chuckle, turning to Kettleburn. Kettleburn boomed happily. Ah, if I have a regret, it's that I won't be arranging another mime show at school. Ahem, let's not mention that. Dumbledore's beard twitched. Though I suppose a mime show can hardly compete with a basilisk. Kettleburn grinned. I've been very honored to serve at Hogwarts. These 60-plus years of teaching have been the happiest of my life. Retirement will bring freedom from pressure, but leaving a job you love leaves a hollow feeling. As you know, I'm not the sort to sit idle. After I leave, I'll keep researching magical creatures, and if I get permission, I may even open a basilisk breeding farm. And as for the new professor, he added with a tease, the school is still assessing candidates, but the result is almost certain. Trust me, it will be an excellent appointment. All right, I'll give the stage back to Dumbledore. Speaking of which, when are you planning to retire, Albus? Kettleburn said, not letting the chance to tease Dumbledore pass. Dumbledore merely chuckled and stood up again. Now let us tally the scores for each house this year. He read them off. Slytherin, 680 points. Ravenclaw, 470. Gryffindor, 450. Hufflepuff, 440. Slytherin's performance this year was unexpectedly strong. Triumphant cheering erupted from the Slytherin table. Boos rose from the others, especially Gryffindor. Everyone remembered how high Slytherin's hourglass had soared during Snape's tenure as headmaster. However, Dumbledore's voice softened and quieted the hall. Because of the extraordinary events this year, some students made exceptionally significant contributions. I said I would acknowledge these at the mid-year feast, so I think they should be counted toward their house's totals. First, Mr. Baron Shafiq of Slytherin. Dumbledore smiled toward the now excited faces at the Slytherin table. He was the first to think of using Spider's behavior to warn us of the basilisk's presence. The early warning device developed from his idea helped students avoid attacks dozens of times during Christmas and protected at least a dozen pupils. Had the basilisk disaster not been contained when it was, his contribution would have been even greater. For this, I will award Slytherin 120 points. Oh. This cheer from Slytherin was genuine. Their total climbed to an astonishing 800 points, almost double that of the second place. Such a gap was unheard of in Hogwarts history. Next, Miss Luna Lovegood of Ravenclaw. After the Slytherin cheers died down, Dumbledore continued. She used her insight, courage, and quick thinking to keep safe a dark arts object left by Lord Voldemort. By restricting it and forcing it into the open, she risked a great deal and prevented its concealment and escape, making a decisive contribution to our final success. For this, I will award Ravenclaw 330 points. Wow! The Ravenclaw table was stunned. Luna was lifted up and celebrated by her housemates. Next is Mr. Harry Potter of Gryffindor. Dumbledore's voice rang out again. He did not hesitate to use himself as bait, enduring the utmost risk to draw that object into the open. He faced it with unexpected composure and courage, laying the foundation for our victory. For this, I will award Gryffindor 350 points. There was little room to debate it. While Ron, Hermione, and the Weasley twins had also contributed greatly, the Marauder's map and the covertly brewed Polyjuice potion could not be brought into the light as public examples. And finally, Dumbledore's gaze shifted to the Hufflepuff table. I must express my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Ken of Hufflepuff. He was the first to suspect the basilisk as the true cause of the attacks and worked on countermeasures. After the spider warning idea was proposed, he perfected the early warning device that protected so many students. He also pieced together clues that revealed the existence of the dark arts item and helped formulate the meticulous plan that made its capture possible. For this, I will award Hufflepuff 360 points. I knew you'd be one of the people Dumbledore would mention, someone nearby murmured. Cedric and Shabby, sitting beside Ken, clapped him heartily on the back. So finally, I will announce the final scores and the winner of the House Cup. Dumbledore seemed completely unfazed by the astonished looks around the hall. He read with a relaxed tone, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin jointly share this academic year's House Cup, each finishing with a final score of 800 points. Huh. For a moment, the hall was silent. Many students and several professors looked bewildered. 4 houses sharing the House Cup was unprecedented in Hogwarts history. Dumbledore didn't pause. He waved his wand, and the banners and streamers decorating the Great Hall shifted, taking on 8 colors: red, yellow, blue, green, gold, silver, gray, and black, arranged with a new symmetry, as if they had always been meant to be this way. 159. Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Oh, how marvelous! In the Great Hall, where banners of 8 colors intertwined, Dumbledore looked down at the astonished students. His eyes, behind his half-moon spectacles, nearly closed into slits as he smiled. Slytherin showed kindness and gentleness. Ravenclaw displayed astonishing courage and perseverance. Hufflepuff used superb wisdom to design ingenious traps. And Gryffindor, well, Gryffindor can act with such skill even speaking parcel tongue like Slytherin. It's remarkable. It almost plainly shows us that being sorted into a house doesn't confine a person to the traits that house is known for. Seeing the students settle into pensive expressions, Dumbledore's smile deepened. Wisdom, courage, kindness, ambition, these beautiful qualities have flowed in our blood from the start. If anyone wants to become a whole, true person, each of those qualities is indispensable. Of course, everyone tends to lean more toward one of these traits. That is why the four founders divided you into houses. They wanted each of you to receive the education best suited to you, to enjoy a carefree youth, to make compatible friends, to develop strengths and compensate for weaknesses. But that has led to a problem. He paused, then spread his hands in mock regret. People have overemphasized their house's spirit, even to the point of believing that, because they belong to that house, they can only ever possess that one quality. In doing so, they overlook other shining qualities in themselves and in others. Gryffindors, have you ever broken rules to show off or mocked those who are quiet and meek? Courage is not the same as recklessness. Maybe the seemingly weak among you hide courage and perseverance equal to anyone's. Ravenclaws, do you look down on those who don't seem as clever or who don't do well on tests? Wisdom isn't only measured by grades, it's present in every part of life. Slytherins, do you sort people by blood or hold grandiose private ideals? Remember, Tom Riddle himself had half Muggle blood. The pride in pureblood lineage also grew from those perilous times when wizards, all wielding wands, stood as a protective force. And Hufflepuffs, do you complain you aren't as clever, brave, or glorious as others and give up on yourselves? If you study the lives of those you consider superior, you might be surprised to find you're not so different after all. Dumbledore's smile faded into a gentle solemnity. His gaze swept the long tables, taking in faces of doubt, contemplation, indifference, and scorn. As I said, every person's blood carries all these beautiful qualities. Being placed in a house doesn't make the others vanish. So why can't we, who share courage, wisdom, kindness, and ambition, understand and tolerate one another? Why should the most prominent traits in us be used to compare and boast, rather than to complement one another? Why should the wands we hold, which can conjure wonders, be used to cast curses and even dark arts against one another? I know Gryffindor and Slytherin have not always seen eye to eye, but tell me, what kind of grudge can last hundreds of years, reach even first years, and make people recoil at simply seeing red or green? If his earlier words had left some students unmoved, this last question silenced everyone. Even those who most disliked Gryffindor or Slytherin found they could not answer immediately. Are there no purebloods in Gryffindor? No brave warriors in Slytherin? Why do I hate a whole house because of a few people? How did I come to despise Slytherin? Harry, Ron, and others stared, unsettled by their own thoughts. Oh, because of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Had they simply transferred their dislike for a few individuals to an entire house? No, surely I'm not that petty. Maybe I don't like Slytherin's house style, but then why did I cheer when Slytherin failed and sigh when they won? Isn't there someone respectable like the Bloody Baron among them? The Slytherins wrestled with similar confusion. Most of them came from wizarding families, taught from childhood that Gryffindors were reckless brats and dishonorable. Yet when they looked critically, Gryffindor's grades weren't worse, their Quidditch wasn't poor, and pure bloods weren't exactly scarce. How many Weasleys were there? Why, then, should I resent Gryffindor? Dumbledore watched the students, especially those from Gryffindor and Slytherin, fall into thought, and a flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. He didn't expect to change everyone's mind at once, but if even a few were willing to think along these lines, his purpose was served. A seed had been planted, a seed of reason and a step toward mending old enmities. With time and care under Hogwarts' guidance, it could take root and grow. Mutual understanding, tolerance, help, and learning from one another, that was the original intent of dividing the houses. Since each of you has a remarkable quality, the four founders together embodied four remarkable qualities. If you unite, if you bring those qualities together, you become a perfect, unshakable group, just like our founders. He paused, staring up at the enchanted ceiling as if lost in memory. Brave Gryffindor, from the wild moors, fair Ravenclaw from the peaceful river, kind Hufflepuff from the broad valley, shrewd Slytherin from the muddy fen. They shared a dream, a wish, and a daring plan to train young wizards. Thus Hogwarts was founded. Perhaps you among the houses can, like the founders, try to know those you once disliked because of house lines. You never know. The people who might become your closest friends, the Godric's, Salazar's, Rowena's, and Helga's among you, may be hidden where you least expect. All right, perhaps I've said too much. Dumbledore rose again with a chuckle. But before you enjoy your feast, I must say one last thing. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. The North Sea. A tiny island lashed by fierce winds and towering waves. It was less an island than a rock outcrop, barely big enough to hold a single modest house. Yet if anyone could, by miracle or with auror clearance, bypass the strict checkpoints and reach its shore, they would be shocked to see a hidden world emerge. The moment you set foot on the island, the single-house patch of rock seemed to open into a vast, impossible complex. High walls, a plaza, a grim fortress, and a disordered graveyard rose up like apparitions. Worse, far more frightening creatures than ghosts gathered to greet you, their formality varying with who you were. This was Azkaban, Britain's only prison for witches and wizards, the place that inspired dread in 1,000 whispered rumors. No matter how fearsome the stories, it remained a prison, and the only one in Britain. That meant prisoners' crimes and sentences varied. So did their cells, their rations, and how often Dementors drained the last of their joy. In the relatively lighter security zones, life was almost tolerable. 4-person cells, 3 meals with hot mashed potatoes and bread, scheduled exercise in the plaza, Dementor patrols only every other day, strict sanitization to prevent outbreaks, and occasionally a small measure of euphoria potion. In short, much like an ordinary Muggle prison. The horrific tales typically described the deepest levels, and the outside world mistakenly took that as the whole truth. If someone truly sought the source of those rumors, they would find the reality worse than imagined. Dementors swarmed the rank, fetid cells. Interior walls shut out sunlight and fresh air. Damp rot and mildew crept through every breath, as if the dark itself would worm into your lungs. The inmates there would never see daylight again. Food and water were barely enough to keep you alive. If a prisoner fell ill and died, they left nothing but a few chalky, white building blocks for the next occupant to stare at. Darkness, filth, and dementors made a true hell in that cramped place. But today the hell sounded different. Rising above the wails was a willful, riotous laugh, so out of place it felt like a local festival in the middle of damnation. Ha ha ha! Well done! Very well done! Sirius Black laughed, his voice booming absurdly from a gaunt body. Look at him now. What did you say to me last year, cousin of mine? Oh, you scum! You have no idea how great the master is. He shrieked, imitating a hysterical female voice with theatrical gestures. This little seal can't hold the master. He's immortal. Dumbledore, that old fool, can't fathom the master's secrets, so he can only buy time trembling, waiting for destruction. And then, Sirius dissolved into another peal of laughter, waving a newspaper at the twisted face across the narrow corridor. Your great master's secret is gone. Ha! A dark arts object that infects the mind, carrying Lord Voldemort's memories. Isn't that a Horcrux? That diary's in Dumbledore's hands now. If he points his wand at it and mouths the words, what do you think will happen to your great master? Bellatrix Lestrange watched his manic laughter with a cold, sneering curl at one corner of her mouth. This idiot, she thought. She did not voice it. Laugh on. Let him laugh. How long will it last? Does he really think the master had only one Horcrux? The true trump card had been placed by me, she thought, hidden in the most secure vault at Gringotts. You and Dumbledore, with your puny brains, would never find it. When you think the master is dead and let your guard down, that will be the moment for his return. Sirius's laughing fit burned itself out. His body, gaunt from malnourishment, could not sustain the exertion. He coughed, rattled, and stopped. He turned from the snake-like girl's eyes and returned his attention to the paper, smiling like a fool at a familiar photograph. Well done, Harry. Truly, well done. You avenged your mother and father, did you know that? James, look at him. Look at your son. He takes after you. He's a seeker too. And better than you. Even Snape obeys him. Sirius wanted to grin again, but found his face numb. He settled instead into a gentle stare, pressing the paper to his chest as if it were warm. Since Lord Voldemort's fall the previous year, the Aurors stationed at Azkaban, partly to amuse themselves, partly to torment the worst of the inmates, had loudly read recent newspapers to the Death Eaters locked in the deep cells. They even handed out copies so the prisoners could study the captured images of their defeated master. The effect had been spectacular. Several of the calmest ones had snapped that very day. Only Sirius Black behaved oddly, laughing so delightedly that guards concluded, with nervous glances, that he too had gone mad. When news arrived that Lord Voldemort's story was breaking again, the Aurors stocked a fresh batch of papers and delivered them to the deepest cells. Hence the scene now, wired Death Eaters, newspapers trembling in their hands. Let's see anything more on Harry. Sirius flipped pages hunting for that face. Snape, a professor, and undercover for Dumbledore? Fits his vile personality. Well, for helping Harry, I'll curse him less today. Hagrid acquitted? That's splendid. I hope the motorcycle I gave him is still running. Ken, what nonsense, not even a full name. Skip. Harry Potter and his friends. This is it. His eyes lit up. He read eagerly, hugging the newspaper like a beloved thing. Weasley? Arthur's boy? He's friends with Harry? Wonderful. He stared at the photograph. James's son smiled with the same awkward, nervous expression. Beside him stood two children, one a girl with slightly prominent front teeth, said to be muggle-born like Lily once was, though not as pretty. The other, freckled and red-headed, was clearly Arthur Weasley's son. He really does look like you, Sirius murmured, studying Ron's face. I hope he escapes his father's bad luck and keeps his hair. He's got a rat. Crud, what an eyesore. Wait,